So warm welcome, everybody. And I think members from the public and Steve, thank you. So good to have you all here. We're going to start with a shared experience and a really warm welcome to Radhika, sorry, I asked and I still got it wrong. When you've got the wrong pronunciation in your head, Radhika, who is one of our palliative care consultants, and thank you, Louise, for accompanying and organising. So we're simply going to hear your story, and I think it would be lovely to just hear about your journey and how you've found it and how you found yourself back here at BHRUT. So you're really welcome, and thank you for taking the time and coming. And if you're happy at the end, we might have time for a few questions as well. So let me hand over to you. Thank you.
Being here, so new consultant. So thank you to the board for allowing me to come and speak today. It's a great opportunity. So in a nutshell, I want to tell you a little bit about me and my training. You'll start to realise I've been back here about 3 or 4 times through my training, and then what sort of prompted me to come back as a consultant. So that's what I'll talk about. And I've been reflecting on this quite a lot. So just a bit about me from the beginning. So I'm originally from Newcastle. One side, I don't have the accent. But my medical training has taken me across the country. So I studied at the University of Manchester, and I also did the integrated degree while I was there, and stayed there for foundation legal F1 and 2 years. I stayed there and worked with the Royal Hospital. Then I decided to move a bit further down south. So I did what used to be called core medical training. It's now called IMT. I did that actually here at BHRUT, between King George and Queen's Hospital, where I did respiratory, endocrinology and general medicine, before going over to the Royal London Hospital, where I did strokes, gerries, and palliative medicine at St. Joseph's Hospital. And that's really where I discovered my passion for palliative care when I went to this. I then applied for a specialty training post, which I got in the East Midlands. I didn't want to leave London, so I commuted daily from London to Leicester for about 1.5 years, and worked at the hospice in Leicester before going to India Central Hospital in Northampton. I then had my first child, and luckily I got an interview transfer back to London, which I was very grateful for, as you can imagine. Once I had my first child, I was then basically in London, and I got to work in a variety of settings from palliative medicine. So I've been at St. Francis Hospice, I've been back at BHRUT for about 1.5 years as a registrar, at the Royal London Barts. So I got to have sort of my last years of training here at BHRUT. I then came back again, so see the trend. I came back again to act as a consultant for 3 months, and I got my transfer post in December. So yeah. 3 or 4 times you count, depending on how you look at it, and I've come back. So what's brought me back here is what I was really trying to think about and reflect on. So lots of reasons, and the palliative care team is great. I love it. But I think we know we serve a hugely diverse population of over 80,000 people. We get a huge mix of different cultures, different backgrounds, and actually we're seeing a whole load of different pathology and medical conditions. And I remember before I started at Queen, the first time I was like, do you know how busy it's getting? And I had no idea. I was going from Manchester, never worked before. And I remember my night shifts, and I remember how busy they were. But I never felt that I was on my own. There was always a registrar, there was always a consultant to go to. So yes, they were busy, and I learned a lot. It was a very steep learning curve, but I always felt supported. I have really fun memories working with the respiratory teams, or doing consultant walk around with them, learning, and doing clinics. And really sort of experiencing that with autonomy and realizing I'm growing as a clinician, and really enjoying it. And then from the palliative care team, you know, it's great. They do a great job. I got to sort of, again, in my latter years, but not just the clinical side, but also leadership management skills that you don't really get taught early on. And actually, I think we should be learning this early on in training. But I got to lead consultant walk rounds. I got to chair MDTs. Support the AHP part of the team. So lots of learning and training those that and I'm reflecting on some of the complexity in the cases that we see. For example, we had a gentleman who had a significant stroke, not suitable for feeding via the stomach, so we have an NG tube to tube into his nose to be fed, with recurrent infections. And there was disagreement between what the medical team felt was in the best interest, and what the family wanted. He wasn't able to advocate himself. So it's that kind of complexity where the medical teams came together, specialties had multiple meetings, and we reflected and we sort of tried to work out what's the best thing for this patient, how do we move forward, but supporting them and also supporting the family. And I saw that as a trainee, and I see it now as a consultant, got a meeting after this actually. So it's that complexity, it never sort of goes away, but it's how we come together as teams, and I've definitely seen that here at teams and people. Yeah, contact people who work together. And I guess culture is a big thing here as well. I've always felt when I've seen that changes can happen, when we've gone to teams to try and, there are ways we can deliver better care. We know with medicine, we're always trying to improve, we're always learning. So the teams that we've gone to sort of feedback and have always been greatly received and, appreciated. There's times cases that urology and respiratory mental governance meeting, just to look at, how can we improve their care, how can we deliver better care to the patients where we looked at areas for improvement. So I think culture is a big thing, and I've really seen that works well here. And if we take it outside of the clinical medicine part and we look at the teaching and training, as a registrar, I got to do developmental teaching, I got to do teaching to the postgrads as well as bedside teaching. You can do as much as you want, there's so much to do. And I think again, for training purposes, that's great. And the consultants, again, there's lots of scope to do that. And I guess because I've been here as a trainee so many times, I've sort of seen from a palliative care perspective what our service needs and how we can develop in the future. That's really helped me look at what my projects are, how we can develop the service going forward. So even though I've only been in the post for 3 months, the things that we're looking at from the palliative care team, just to give you an idea of what we're doing at the moment. So we've invigorated sort of the relationship with the pain team colleagues that we have to think about actually interventional procedures. So we now have a meeting once a week, and our colleagues were informally talk through any cases. We are working to try and do ad hoc connects with them to care. They see a lot of the patients that we see just earlier on, so we're now trying to put ad hoc clinics with them. And we have a palliative care, complex neurosurgical palliative care MBC, which we're hoping to restart. And ITU expressed an interest in coming to join that. So again, around complex decision making with these things that we deal with, it's just another forum to kind of support each other and make decisions together. So there's so much to do. You've probably heard about our A&E project where we have DNSs and a paramedic, private care paramedic at the front door to 10 people around to try and avoid admissions. We're doing great work down there. I think the team does amazing. But that's my experience as a trainee here now into the whole level. I think it's great. I think that's how you would retain trainees coming through. It's just the culture and support of big factors. If I know you asked me about my experience to interview and coming through to the recruitment stage, and my panel was great, fine, but it was very supportive. It was, felt very much at ease. So really kind of would enjoy the members, but it was a good experience in terms of the panel and the interview, and I was very grateful to come back here. So yeah, good to be here. Just to acknowledge, I know everywhere has challenges, and we know that there's busy pressures, but we have got things in place to try and alleviate that, including exec beds, and working with our community department to try and alleviate some of those bench pressures. So it's about sort of creating solutions without always having to read the these numbers. But yeah, I'm really happy to be back, and I guess that's my experience as a trainee and now thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant, and really lovely to hear such a positive account of your journey and how you found yourself here. I suppose one question, I don't know how much you get a sense from colleagues you work alongside, but do you know whether that sort of experience and the opportunities and the things you've described in terms of the nature of the working, the relationships and so on, Do you think that's typical across all disciplines, or is that peculiar to the palliative care team and the nature of the work you do, or? Yeah.
You know, I think that being very intense support. So, I just don't know about it.
Yeah. No, that's really excellent. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions. So Marta and then Caroline. Marta, sorry, can you speak up? Because we haven't got the microphones and we can't all hear you, especially when you're facing the other way.
It's not just at the end of life in the last few days. So I guess it's more awareness from the whole about who we are and what we do. I don't think that's specific here. I think you get that wherever you go, as a professional. Just really not understanding the role of palliative care. You know, we really can, and I advocate for early palliative care. So I think it's more just understanding across the board of who we are and what we do to me. Because I've seen it many times, we still get it, you know, it's with patients that are going to be dying if not for you. And so we have to explain who we are and what we do. There's just more, I guess, more education and training.
Thank you. Caroline.
Thank you. I was wondering, what's comparative care teach other disciplines?
There's a lot. I think communication is a big thing. We had a big conversation session a couple of weeks ago here at St. Warders where we focused on communication with families. Because we recognise how difficult that can be, and even with the best communication skills, it doesn't mean that things go the way you want them to go. But I think we can definitely see communication when it's done well and difference that can make in terms of how patients and families feel. So I know our team are working on making it mandatory advanced communication skills. And I had to have that as part of my training for palliative medicine, and we had to do an advanced communication skills before part of our training. So I think it should be, again, expand that. We need to be having relationships, and things like the NAR discussions are really difficult sometimes. If we don't do them often, that can be really challenging, but I think the more practice, the better. Communication.
Really helpful. Thank you. Ruth.
Hi, so I did. You also, picked up a few of it later. So I'm a GP by trade, and I'm delighted. There is certainly a gap we feel about fast tracking palliative patients. But how do you think the trust we can do that working with our partners, with the GP and our community partners like now, to try and make that happen? Because at the moment, I don't think people are dying in their first place. We do make that, we've got some things, but I think even that data is not representative of how badly we do this. But how can we do that in partnership so that we create a very safe, supportive pathway for those patients and their family, particularly in the landscape of the hospice being shorter than it's ever been of funding? How do you think that happens?
I think it's challenging. I think we noticed that a lot, that people aren't recognising dying or recognising mental health in the last year of life. We know 20 people are dying, and that's not where they want to die. So I don't think there's an easy answer to that, but things like the projects like the EP project downstairs, we can identify independence around for British avoidance. And I think some more work with the community as well. So these sort of bound care plan discussions can happen a lot earlier, and we find that they don't. Universal care plans, often not building, if they are, it's majority of the team that are doing them. We know we've got time to complete, so universal care plan is where you have to make sure about care plans, but not utilising the tools that we do have. I wish there was an easier answer to that, but I think it's a lot of work with the community team.
And how do we create that shared responsibility? I agree, using things are happening, people publicly and things happening to a point in primary care, but not as well as we need them to happen. But they don't then seem to happen in the other specialties. So even oncology, which you think is an amazing specialty for it to be in, it doesn't feel like they happen until they get to you. That crossover from oncology and palliative care is too abrupt. You're not getting pulled into doing enough. And they do take cases, but the whole point is you don't have to fill them in all at once. So how do we, particularly now we've got the EPI, it feels like the excuse not to do this gone, like that ship is safe. How do we get all of our colleagues, both nursing, doctors, everyone involved in UCP to make it worthwhile?
Yeah, and I also want to teaching sessions I did a big conversation was around how you do the ECP, and we know it can take a lot of time, but as you said, you can do it as you go, you don't have to do it all at once. So I think it's teaching, training, education are key. And I know colleagues in the community that are working with nursing homes to make sure that they have confidence in to do the tech form to the community. But often again, these are places where they should be happening and they don't. So Dr. Russell, I know that from the hospice, we're working on that in the community. I think we need to be educating and thinking more about it as we can. I know our end of life care skill gauges are trying to do that with rules. Yeah, I think it's difficult. It is really challenging.
Thank you. So I've got Nick and then Janine.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for all the work you're doing because, you know, everybody knows we're doing the work of college.
Yeah.
And some of the end of life work is already happening in ED, but actually it's really accelerated over the last 2 months. And there's a really proactive multidisciplinary approach to turning those patients around at the point where they should just stay. And we met before you were interviewing, and I was quite inspired by your ideas and some of the things that we get with you from going to the other places. And you've got a team who are really motivated to work with you, which I think is a sign of good leadership.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. Janine and then Dip.
Echoing it, I think it's really fascinating, but really brilliant care that we're doing for our patients and communities able to through. The tough question is what you described is a really great example of partnership working that we've been talking in the earlier. It's one of the things that we're very passionate about, accelerating and doing more. So it's one to take your learnings. And it would be good to maybe do that more formally as well, so we can might be able to expand that. But talking about learning from other areas, I wonder, so within maternity, we've introduced the craving cultures and thinking about the needs of the different cultures and ethnicities that we serve. I wonder, have you thought about, or have you something similar? Because I know relationships with death, how we talk about death and end of life, does vary by different cultures. So are we bringing that through as well?
I think that's an ongoing project that we need to do better at as well. We were reflecting on that as a team. We noticed that from young patients from veteran background presenting very late. That is quite productive example. And we reflected on it as actually quite sensitive members of the team and just sort of seeing it and being why it's happening. So I think we're trying to get more involved with community leaders from particular backgrounds to actually see if they can do something in education around that. There's a lot of work to do in the community because it often depends on the prices when they come in. So we're looking at sort of things that could have been maybe changed earlier on. But I still think that there's that that palliative care, for example, CBR is a specialty, and then acceptance of that culture and background is still a challenge on the leads. So I think it's again breaking down some of those barriers and trying to reach out to the community and people that have the impact, make some changes. I know the hospitals are doing something around that at the moment, and I think that you got that offline. Yeah, there is what's going on.
Thank you. Dip.
And very quickly, I have to say that I was part of that movie from family.
Well done.
On a serious note, I wanted to say that I'm really thankful to Janine and quite a lot of knowledge there that we take part in the in the panel. Because what I have seen in my not so short stay in the HR is that we have moved towards purely skill-based, task-focused recruitment to value-based leadership, sort of emphasis on those sort of things. And what I felt when I listened to that is that there are almost value leadership instead. Palliative care has always traditionally been the steward of intelligent kindness. Both words have been before. They also took a huge amount of role in education. We had Claire Betts, some of you may remember. She was an absolute asset for us. And then we had a gap, and Lucy and Claire Betts, they all went direct back and talking about also. We had some really stalwarts, and then we had a gap. Now we've got Amy Trophy, who's been around for a bit, and now Radhika has joined. And you can already see the green shoots of, for example, the ED work that we talked about, which is really important. Ruth, I think the last board you asked about, we have to be careful about not overloading them, especially quality care, so they don't need more support in education. And just the last thing to say is that regarding the ECC, Andrew's not here to speak for it, but Andrew has already started a workshop on this here, and that brings it forward. The initiative, it's not done, but I think it's in the sort of top box of it.
Lovely. Thank you, Radhika. Thank you. I think you've taught us a lot, both in terms of why you're here in your journey and how it has been in terms of your training, your leadership, the ongoing teaching, but also open our minds to the world of palliative care as well, which is something that clearly a lot of us need to understand even better. So dual win in terms of what we've gained from you coming. But thank you so much for your time and for being so open, and good luck with what you do. It sounds like a really important area of work, and it's great to have you join us as a consultant. So congratulations. Lovely. And Louise, thank you for organising as ever. Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thanks. Right. Okay. So we moving on just to check if there are any declarations of interest for anything on today's agenda. No. Okay. We have the minutes of the previous meeting. That was a meeting held on the 15th of January. Does anyone have anything they want to pick up on that? No. So are we happy to approve? Thank you. Matters arising. I don't think we had any. So we're okay there. And action tracker, we only had one action, which was to hear from one of our consultants, and we've just done it. So that's a lovely big tick. So that's excellent. So now if I can find my way through my own papers, I was going to give a bit of an update. Yes, so in terms of where I've been and what I've been doing, it always looks like such a lot when I'm looking back over a couple of months as to what's been going on. So at a national sort of outside of our area, obviously we've had our London Chairs Network that continues. Really interesting session, our most recent one, where we had Tom Kabassi come and talk with us about the approach to specialised commissioning and that kind of work that he's going to be leading on and what we need to think about there. And we also had the chief executive from the MHRA. So interesting to hear from him as well. We had, I won't go through everything. Last week, a number of us, Peter, Matthew, Nick and I were all at the Corridor Care Summit. It was a bit of a three-line whip, but it was a really interesting session, and actually a great opportunity for learning from each other, shared issues and so on. But the senior team were all there, and it was excellent that the NHSE senior team, that is, and excellent that Tim Briggs from the GERFT team actually called us out as an exemplar in terms of the fabulous work that we've been doing here, that I know Nick has been leading, but loads of people have been involved in terms of tackling our corridor care, and it really has been transformational. So that's excellent to note, and really good to get that public recognition for all of that work. I went over and visited West Herts Hospital, which was interesting to see their proposed area for a mental health urgent care centre, highlighting again, I mean, that's going to be the second one in Hertfordshire because there's one at the Lister. Really good to see. But I also had a look around their hospital, and I have to say, the complaints and the questions about the light in our new ED plans, I went into the ED at West Herts Hospital and it was like being in a war zone, genuinely. So dark, so dingy. So I know ours could always be better, but it's lovely to go somewhere and see how even more challenged environments are, and then come back here and see what a fabulous setup we've got. So that was a very positive visit for a number of reasons. Locally, within the system, we've had our ongoing chairs meetings with North East London chairs. All the focus, of course, is about financial positions, year end and planning and medium term planning. So lots of discussion there. And of course, the strategy for North East London, which has just been introduced in its final form and shared for people. A couple of APC meetings, the joint committee meeting and the APC chairs and CEOs meeting a couple of weeks ago. The next upcoming meeting in March, we've got Jim Mackey coming to talk, which has been a sort of long-standing invitation that Barts put out to him. So he's going to come and talk to us, which will be hosted at Barts. So it'll be interesting to hear what he has to say. It's towards the end of March, so sort of rounding up the year end and thinking about the year ahead. We will see what happens. I went to the Barts Heroes Staff Awards evening. A number of NEDs from here were there as well, and some of our colleagues from across the trust who'd been invited. So that was a lovely event. I know the Barts charity is on a very different scale to the embryonic independence of our charity, but it gives a sense of what a successful and thriving charity can afford to fund for a trust. So something to think about for the future, perhaps. Internally here, so over the last couple of months, lots of joining the organisational goals meetings, which has led to the development of the planning work and the medium-term plan. So that's just been really interesting to be involved in all of those and get a sense of the conversations that we're having and will continue to have as the plans come to fruition. Caught up with our chaplaincy lead, Phil Wright, had a session with the staff side meeting, which is very interesting in the context of the upcoming challenges and pathology that we're aware of. And then I've had a number of fabulous visits. I spent an entire day, and it really was an entire day, in robotic surgery with the colorectal team, which was unbelievable and an eye-opener in so many ways. Went to visit the dermatology team, which also gave a sense of opportunities to transform, do things differently, do things in different places. So that was fascinating. Visited our women's services, paediatric, visited audiology and had my hearing tested, and that's all okay. So that's good to report. And this week I joined the on-call bed management meeting that Nick was the on-call lead for that. Just fascinating. It really gives a good sense of how tightly things are managed and how in touch with all the detail, and even towards the end of the evening, people being moved from one site to another to make sure they're in the best place, and we're reducing numbers in corridors. So that was a really good opportunity to experience. And then we had the CARES launch event a couple of weeks ago, which was for the research initiative in anaesthetics and critical care. A really excellent event. It was an all-day event. I was only able to be there for the morning, but a number of people were able to be there for some of it. And just so interesting, so much commitment, so much energy in terms of the opportunity to grow our research work. So we'll be really supporting that. And we had some external speakers as well. And what was lovely, it was hosted by the clinicians, but they highlighted, and we had, it opened with patients talking about their personal experiences and their interest in and being involved in research opportunities, which was a really helpful reminder all the way through the day as to why we do all of what we do. But then some of the specific examples on research projects that have been led in the trust weren't all led by our medics. So there was one from one of our pharmacy leads and one from one of our dietitians. So it was really great to see the full breadth of disciplines that can get involved and can lead on research. So that was really exciting. So I might leave though. And then of course we had, we had the graduation ceremony at the House of Commons, which many of us were able to attend, and that was absolutely fabulous as ever. A really good celebration of just that continued commitment to learning and the energy and the excitement amongst all the apprentices who have graduated. It's a really lovely way to celebrate all their efforts, and their managers actually who support them and give them time and so on. So that was absolutely fabulous. We also had over the last, since we were last together in public, the Speak Up and Inclusion Cafe, and we had the signing of our commitment to the Anti-Racism Charter. So and one of our local MPs joined us for that. So that was excellent. So it's been busy, lots of sort of useful and learning things, but the framing in terms of as we go into the board meeting now, of course, is all about the planning and the challenges. And the sort of latest bit of news since we last got together, of course, that we talked about earlier this morning, but just from a public point of view, we have announced yesterday that Matthew has been offered and accepted the role as CEO at King's. So he will be leaving us in the next few months. We have yet to agree all the details around that. And Fiona is going to step up to be interim CEO at that point whilst we do our formal approach to recruiting substantively. So that just alters where we are, how things are going to be changing for us yet again. Time is always changing over the next few months, but huge congratulations to Matthew, and King's will be lucky to have him. So I think that's it for me, but I've got I haven't got it in front of me, the membership and attendance report. I don't know if I have anything particular I need to say on that, other than thank you. You can see where it, oh yes, sorry, yes. So probably worth mentioning that my term as chair has been extended, which is quite handy. It wasn't quite coming up, but I've been given a short term. I think I was obviously seen as a questionable option. No, that wasn't. For some reason they didn't want to have all the chairs ending at the same time, and so it was staggered, and mine would have been due to end in a year. So NHSC have very kindly extended me now until end of 29, so January 29, which is great. And we as a trust have extended our contracts for our two fabulous associate non-execs, Ruth and Caroline, and they've now both had a 2-year extension to March 28, which is fabulous, and we are delighted that we will continue to have all of their support and expertise for guaranteed next couple of years, which is fantastic. I'd already mentioned and welcomed Lorraine, but Lorraine and Danny have both joined us since we last met. Lorraine as our Director of Financial Turnaround, but in the meantime also acting CFO, and Danny, who isn't able to be with us today, as our next director. He'll be with us for a year, really in an observing and learning opportunity for him, who aspires to be in it. So I think that's it in terms of that update. Thank you, Linda. Sorry, I didn't have that in front of me. And let me hand over to Matthew for your CEO report. Thank you.
Okay. There's a lot in the report. I'll focus on a couple of things. First is on finances. We'll hear more later in the meeting. But as people are aware, we're heading for a £65 million deficit this year. That's against a spend of around £1 billion. And that's in the face of demand for services that's outstripping our underlying funding. We've had the EPR rollout this year. But there's context around it. But the ask of us from the system is very much that we live within our means. So there'll be more discussion on that. And in that context, we've got Lorraine with us as Director of Financial Turnaround and currently stepping into the CFO role. In the summer, we'll also be joined by our new Chief Financial Officer, Kevin Carnow, who's coming to us from East London Foundation Trust as well. So they'll be there to work with the clinical teams, the operational teams, to try to get the very best value that we can out of our financial position. And there's an example of how you can do that alongside improving quality. The chair mentioned the work that Nick Kane, our Chief Nurse, has been doing with DIP and others to try to improve the way that we manage patients through our hospitals. And it's been interesting looking at February 2026 compared to February 25. We've had the same numbers of people coming through both sites. But last February at Queen's, for example, we had 24,200 hours worth of corridor care. This February, with the same demand, that was down to under 14,000 hours. So we've saved more than 10,000 hours in corridor care. Amazing. As a result of focusing on flow, doing the right things around discharge, getting a stronger specialty response into A&E, making earlier decisions in frailty to help some of our older residents get seen immediately by a geriatrician and a nurse and a therapist so they can get straight back home rather than spending a day or two in a busy impact emergency department. So it's had a really good quality impact. It's really helped us, interesting with our performance, which we'll report next month, so I won't spoil it, but it's very good. And it's also allowed us to spend £150,000 less in month on temporary staffing. So we didn't do this to save money. We did this to improve quality, patient experience and staff experience. But February's a short month. We often forget that in the NHS. If you scale up that £150,000 from February over the course of a year, you get to just shy of £2 million worth of temporary staffing savings. So that's an example where we're doing the right thing for the right reasons, but the consequence of that also is an improved financial position. And I think the other benefits of it are considerably outweigh the finances in terms of the experiences of staff in those corridors. There's a lightness actually about the A&E departments on both sites at the minute that I haven't seen for some time. And a shout out to King George, who've also saved a further just shy of 2,000 hours as well. So it does prove that things can be done in that way and deliver the right kind of financial benefits. And I think that's the kind of approach we're wanting to take as we try and get our teeth into the savings we need to deliver next year, which will be around 4% of turnover yet again. That does save us money, but we do need to do more and do it quickly. So we have got in place a recruitment freeze at the minute until 1st of July. If you go into our website, you'll see 2 or 3 jobs on there rather than the usual 50 or 60. We have got exemptions in place for safety critical roles or statutory roles as well, and we are working through that. We've got a big focus on internal recruitment and taking advantage of the investment we've made in staff training, in apprenticeships and so on, and recognising that we've got 1,600 more staff than we had 4 years ago. So this is not about us removing resource that we've had for a long time. This is just about us putting the brakes on some really significant clinical staffing growth. But we do need to start taking some steps to help us reduce the amount we spend every month. So that recruitment freeze is in there. We'll review it when we come up towards the end of the first financial quarter of the year to see what we can do around that. And we're doing what we can to try to improve the amount we spend internally in the meantime. We're also launching a grassroots savings campaign, taking advantage of the real enthusiasm there is amongst our workforce to try to get better value for money out of the way in which we run and deliver services too. I think they're probably key points that are in there this month. There's more in there on maternity improvements. One of the cost pressures actually for us is maternity, but it's an area where we're absolutely confident that we've done the right thing there. We've spent more money than we're funded for in maternity services, but the quality's improved. That's the kind of decision we take as a board. And Baroness Amos has produced their second interim report. The final recommendations will be coming up later. And there's more information in the report there about some of the work we've done on waiting lists. Visit for some Jim Mackey recently, where I think he really enjoyed himself. I mean, it was the 20th of January and he said it was the best visit of the year so far. But he also said it was a really impressive visit with some really cohesive working between the clinical, admin and ops teams. Some really joyful and proud staff actually talking about the work they do, and some patients offering great feedback on the services they've received. And so Jim has been a big supporter of us, particularly around the work we've done on waiting lists and so on. And it was great to have him here as well. And finally, the chair's mentioned the House of Commons event, but thanks to Barking MP Nesl Caliskin, who sponsored that event at the House of Commons, and to local MP stroke Secretary of State for Health Wes Streeting, who also joined us and gave a fantastic speech to all of our staff about the importance of the work they do here in the NHS. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matthew. Any questions at this point, or shall we move on to the rest of the agenda? Okay, so let's move on. The Quality Assurance Committee, Marta.
There's some work to do in the progress area, particularly with respect to women and working particularly make decisions which are outside of the guidelines, but extremely carry high risk, not only for the mothers and the babies, but also the our staff. But our question is, how do you do and you do that you need to be able to combine this? The deep dive on discussion for our last meeting was on pharmacy, the ability to successful implementing of technology, and so where they started to produce savings, although the course implementation review is planned for the end of June, about 6 months after the implementation. We did discuss the integrated quality and safety performance, and that our consideration was that the outcome service needed to be good. We've already discussed point here, and the difference in the models which have been piloted and producing what we has done with the same quality with those statements. Concerns, I suppose, would be around the authority that this system for medical services and potentially the upcoming diligence trial. That we heard about it, but the thing that we need to consider is the fact that if according to the end of the history when the implemented the translation advertisement system with regulations, and we're on track to actually get back to our performance that we were to by the end of March. And we also looked at the young journey, young update for what was happening when we worked conjointly with our community partners, particularly young people who are in the department for a certain period of time because of inability to actually be placed and where they should be placed, the ability to be working schools. And I'm happy to
Thank you. I had a couple. Really was sort of questioning the scoring. So in relation to the integrated quality and safety report, significant assurance with minor improvements, but just reading through that list of areas for improvement, they might not directly be kind of medical safety, but they're things that keep coming up. And I think, you know, it does feel a little bit like own goals that some of these things that we are not getting to grips with. So duty of candor compliance, the timely response to complaints, the sepsis thing, you know, there seems to be quite a lot. And I just wonder, first of all, whether that number of and the, you know, whether we're giving sufficient importance and prioritization to dealing with those. And similarly, on the, in relation to children and young people's mental health, again, children's their ED journey, and I suppose it's a balance of, you know, the being proportionate. However, the particular challenges of young people with mental health, and I think we've still got a girl in our ED who's been there for probably 52 days now. You know, it might only be one or two examples, but we have had a number. And so again, I just wonder whether from an assurance point of view, we're getting the scoring right on both of those. Mm.
therefore, that is something that is without control. When you come here to have a different scoring and call the performance in that field. And I think the other thing that you mentioned with this strategic plan, that it's not a strategic plan, but it's not being carried out, but in happenings in the past with its findings. And the committee discussed that, and they were assured about processes that will be put in place to improve that with those processes.
Yeah.
And that's what scoring represents.
Yeah. Fair enough. And I think it's something we maybe need to keep an eye on, that if it keeps coming back to quack and we're not making that progress, I think that's something we might want to try and do something more significant about helping the compliance position improve. Thank you. Good. No other questions. So thank you for that. Let's move on then. Nick, I think you're going to talk us through the antimicrobial resistance improvement plan. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Do come and join us at the table. And thank you. Just so you know, our microphones are not working. So we're all making sure we speak as loudly as we can so everyone can hear, and particularly for the benefit of our note takers. So thank you very much. You're very welcome.
First of all, let's give some introductions.
Yes.
Chief Pharmacist.
Welcome. Thank you.
Why are we here? So we want to pay for a response to an NHS letter that was sent out to all trusts and ICBs. And the title of the letter sent out to the trust was Act Now, Protect and Prevent, Secure Our Future. So this letter highlights the fact that antimicrobial resistance is one of the top global public health issues. And actually, antimicrobial resistance is listed on the UK government's National Risk Register. So before the paper's asking for the trust to set out 3 objectives around antimicrobial stewardship. Before I go into that, I'd just like to go over our previous action plan that we had. So this is the second action plan, our previous action plan, and where we are in relation to that. So the first action plan targeted 2 things for organisations. The first was to reduce total antibiotic consumption by 15%, and also reduce by 10% reduction in broad spectrum antibiotics. So just like to let the board know, that at the current moment in time, we achieved a 35% reduction in both. So very good progress against those targets. Now, just to give some context, initially, in terms of total antibiotic consumption, we were one of the top 10 highest trusts in England. We are now in the bottom 20, so we have markedly improved our position. How we manage this? So this is really through a strong AMS, so antibiotic stewardship program, led collaboratively by pharmacy, by microbiology, by antibiotic stewardship pharmacy, and we support all our clinical teams. So that's good progress. So what have we picked going forward? So there's 3 items we have picked on. The first one is to reduce our use of broad spectrum antibiotics. This is the target that has been set by NHS England. So I don't know if you're familiar with broad spectrum antibiotics treat kill a lot of bacteria, and that is not a good use of antibiotics. You really use antibiotics that are targeted to the organism to stop resistance spreading. Currently, we use 48% of what they call access antibiotics. So these are specific antibiotics. So currently we use 48% of our total amount of antibiotics. Our target has been set to 61% by 2029. So that's a 27% improvement. So that's one of the targets we have picked. The second, although we have reduced the overall consumption of antibiotics by 35%, unfortunately, our proportion of IV antibiotics within that niche is not very good. In fact, we are one of the top 10 highest users of IV antibiotics, even though our total use is very low. So one of the other objectives we set for the next 3 years is to reduce the duration and use of IV antibiotics and more quickly and appropriately switch patients to oral antibiotics. The advantage of doing something like that is it improves patient safety, shortens the length of stay for our patients, reduces line-related complications, improves patient comfort, and supports sustainability. And our final objective is around IPC, and it's a reduction of hospital-acquired E. coli blood infection by 10%. So what we are asking the board is to approve those 3 objectives that we have set. The plan will be that these will be monitored through our AMS group, which meets quarterly, and through our governance processes, and to the board on a yearly basis of our position. Any questions?
Brilliant. Sounds excellent. Thank you very much. Caroline.
Thank you very much for that. Now, I'm not a clinician, owner. I was interested in what could the public patients, how could they support what we're doing? Because obviously it's clearly it's a good aim, but what would you like people to know?
Actually, antibiotics is everyone's responsibility. We're all using antibiotics. So part of it to work with the ICBs around communication, but they're very simple things. There's an element if the GP prescribes you antibiotics, make sure you complete the course. Very basic things, but we don't do that. that causes resistance. And also, I think a lot of just raising awareness that there is a problem with antibiotics, not just in the UK, worldwide, and how we in effect are running out of antibiotics to be able to kill certain bacteria. So I think it's that. Also, not to bug your GP to constantly give you antibiotics for things that are viral. GP's got a lot of pressure. You may want to come. They get a lot of pressure. It's about that awareness to say, look, it's a viral, don't need antibiotics. But that's everybody's responsibility. It's not just the GP's responsibility or the healthcare professionals. So absolutely, it's that education and making the people aware that antibiotics will only be given when it's absolutely necessary. And then when they do give it, make sure you complete your course.
Thank you. Ruth?
She's got a question to me, so I get very interested in farming as well. But I think there has to be also shared responsibility across clinicians. It is not unusual that people go to see the GP and the GP says, no, it's viral. And then they come to A&E with the same presentation and automatically get antibiotics, which completely undermines what we've done. And yet in their discharge summary it says viral illness. So it's clinical decision is the same and yet the appropriate management. How much at the moment is the trust aligning with medicines management requests that are going out across primary care? So we have very strict guidelines, both formulary and we have like incentives around like 5 days rather than 7 days, for example. And then the other is if as we start to move away from IV antibiotics, that will also have a green impact, a significant green impact. Have we managed to kind of capture what we think that improvement will be?
The last question first, yes. We're just working through an NHS tool that we're working through that will show us if we reduce IV antibiotics, what the benefits will be, and that we will circulate widely within the trust and circulate outside. As to your first point, absolutely. So part of what the challenge we have, and you as the medical director, I think it's quite well aware and on board with it, that we have to make our own clinicians aware of what the importance of antibiotics are. Absolutely, we will not shy away from that. I think there are some advantages that we've got now that we did have previously. So I think when we run using paper drug charts, it's extremely difficult to be able to order and do things. The part, and Donald here, elaborate, Donald also would have been a microbiologist, is a digital element that he first. And so what we're doing is creating reports, and we're working with the teams at the moment to understand where those IVs are being used and by who. And then, so as well as a general education program, I think that the more targeted approach to use that. Now, in saying that, it's also important to make sure we get the clinician's view, because for our population, that antibiotic may be appropriate, but it's getting those conversations, but having the data to be able to have the conversation, rather than a general message that please can you stop doing it, when actually a clinician may think, this is the right thing for my patient, why are you telling me to do it? So it's having a more nuanced conversation. So hopefully that will help the decision, but absolutely take point forward.
Just to go a little further on that, I think the digital side of that sort of like, so one thing, since we've got EPR, we now use London Care more effectively. Now data goes on to London Care and the allergy might share onto London Care which they didn't previously. And we can also check that they've had a medicine before and us. So we do penicillin, allergy penicillin are the key. Well, patients that are mislabeled penicillin allergy is a key driver of inappropriate antibiotics and more broad spectrum we need, and that having that facility, it helps us assess whether a patient really has penicillin allergy, and if we have to look at the GP record and corroborate that, that's the key thing we can actually use as well.
Thank you.
Feedback from emergency, for example, we've got audits for the department dealing with the prescribing, and we have fed back to the department where the prescribed percentage of the prescribers has been inappropriate or not related to their documented clinical condition. And this has been taken on board by the department themselves, who are now auditing themselves. And what we've done is we've also reduced the TTA impacts in A&E for broad spectrum antibiotics, and reduced, even if we reduced from 7 days to 5 days, that is a significant improvement.
Thank you. Janine, and then Marta.
It's wonderful to hear that and what they to be involved in the care record building the picture of what we know about the community. But with that, to your point about clinicians believing that actually you're asking us to go against what we believe to be in the best interest of patients, I wonder, have we developed the feedback thing with it? So, are we able to pull from data and show actually, whereas previously we've given ourselves this patient, in this case we didn't, and look, they haven't come back, they're well, they've recovered, so that we can start to build a positive reinforcing narrative.
I think, Jenny, that's the advantage of an EPR. We can start doing that work. Unfortunately, paper-based, it's always impossible to get data. So currently we are working with a BIT to exactly get that, and also to get data every morning, see which patients are on particular antibiotics, like a microbiome pharmacist can target. So it's that targeted approach and understanding. So it's challenging, but in the right sense. But then you're right, that will give us the data to show back that actually, look, if we do this, this will support basically at home. And there's national data as well. So part of what they say there is data already that switch people quickly to oral, and also the right antibiotic at the right time get better outcomes. So.
But within that, I think there's for our population, the quality impacts, we recognise the significant diversity in the populations and some of the demographic challenges that brings. So I think having a narrative that gets brought from national, but reflects our local.
Absolutely. And that's part of it. We do have a diverse population, so I identify with the resistance may be different to general country, absolutely. And that's something, that conversation we need to have to make sure. But again, that data will give us that ability to see where it is. But I think overall we are using, there's no two ways about it, we're using too much. And there's an element of what we've managed to do is reduce the total amount very well, but haven't shifted the type of antibiotics we use or a method of administration. So obviously we've achieved that, so I'm confident we can do it, it needs work, but we will do it. And I think there's a larger piece, it's not just a clinician element, as well as pharmacy, it's our nursing colleagues as well. So it's empowering people who actually challenge and say, look, this patient's all right. So I think we need to develop those pathways and not just rely on clinician, but there are many other people involved in the care of that patient, and they can also make those interventions more appropriate.
And when we're tracking the funding outcomes, so like, for example, sepsis awareness, well, consequence that I'm not a clinician at all, but I'd imagine the same will be falling into ethics for but are we tracking and making sure there aren't any inadvertent?
Not aware, but I think they track really this antibiotics, and we've got data to back that. So it's more about, like I said, it's more about but within that framework that we've got. So we have a micro guide already, so we already got quite extensive guide of what you do for each condition, and clinicians follow that. It's an app online that they can use on their phone. So we've developed guides or made it easy for people to be able to use the right antibiotic for the right thing. But there's still a big educational piece about this is what we've got, this is how we need to do it, and there'll be a monitoring audit to make sure people are following what we need to do. But ultimately, that's what we all need to do. And hopefully, with the data we get, it'll be easier to follow than we had before.
Thank you. Marta and Dip, had you had your hand up?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Okay.
We can do that now. So it's not a complete sticker price, there's a vote, but there is now data that we can use to hone in specific assets rather than general messages. We can specifically ask why a particular speciality or a consultant, and it may be absolutely valid because of the follow, but at least we can have the right conversations out of the morning conversations we need.
Can I just ask a question, because you might be the one who might answer it as well, Dip? So I was just wondering, so if we are now putting people, if they go on to IV antibiotics, but for a shorter period of time, so is it the case that you might go on to IV for a couple of days and then we'd put you on to oral? Does that allow us then to forward plan the discharge okay, excellent. And are we doing it? Yes, I assumed it would. It's whether we take advantage in our practice actually then to plan and arrange the discharge so they can go home actually 2 days earlier or 5 days earlier rather than they could have done, but they're now taking their medication through, orally and they're still here. But Nick, maybe you're answering that.
Sure that we are talking about the same thing. We have got that has a huge advantage that even if you're on any antibiotic, that is not really enough. We
True.
do that out.
True. Yeah.
The other thing that I want to mention is that this is a great example of how clinical behavior is not just something innate to people, it is the environment in which they work. So the reason that reduce, and I'm sure that will agree, is the microbiome. So once every clinician could actually access it easily, it just goes to show that actually they started doing appropriate antibiotics. And I think the next extension is going to be what you are talking about. I think to start with team feedback is a good thing because there is continuity of care. Often the same clinician is not there. If somebody starts the antibiotic, who's going to switch that person will be different. So I think that's important. And we have a plan on this. And one of our ex-colleagues is going to come and do some sessions, which is about developing this.
Thank you.
About veterinary medicine, because that's actually one of the bigger problem. We are one of the best countries in terms of antibiotic resistance, but we do know that there's a lot of cross resistance from veterinary medicine.
So Nick, I should brought you in too early because you're going to come in anyway. Okay.
The outpatient antibiotic.
Yes.
The legal practice to clarify what that is. And the team have recently, I mean, we've had an offer of some kind which involved that wasn't really 7 days a week, but it was a limited service. The team have really embraced it, and we've set up an NDT now, haven't we, where we can actually move people out failure and get back into the community. So they don't even need to stay in hospital at all. So if we see them to arrest it, we should let them out. So
Excellent.
and if you find for joining
Brilliant. Excellent. If there are no more questions, thank you very much. Really good to see. Well, obviously it was a requirement to come and bring it to us, but it's great to see a project that's satisfying our commitments, but making a positive change as well for patients and time resourcing. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Right, and then we're on to the integrated quality and safety report. Nick. Yes.
It's very positive considering the business of the hospital. In regards to patient research, we did see deterioration in that. To be honest with you, we've done a deep dive into the patients that have had that deterioration, and we did have a long periods in the corridor before they reached their actual destination of their beds, and it's the HDU corridor particularly. So what we've done, we've put in a so now that we only use that corridor if it's been escalated up through management structures and dealing with that's the only thing we can do. So hopefully we should see that reduce, and that goes back to the black paper of where we provided assurance around our plan. Complaints as well, because we've changed our process. If we're collecting complaints data, hopefully we'll improve as we be in bed for response between 40 days. And we're closely monitoring the number of reopened complaints, so that's also an indicator of quality. So we hope that will be on improve as well. And we're working with teams around frozen incidents, and there's a number of ways of operation to handle.
Thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned the duty of candour. So I guess just the summary of issues that need dealing with, I think it's on page 53. I mean, just reading that, and it is obviously in summary form, so it all comes together. So bottom of areas of concern, bottom of page 52, and then on to 53. It just feels like a whole series of areas where we need to be getting the basics right. And it's a collective, you know, there'll be pockets of areas where we're letting ourselves down, but it reads like a series of own goals that we probably would want to avoid. And some of it is sort of just missing targets, and it is that discipline, I suppose, and what is it that we need to do to enable our teams to do better on a lot of this sort of the basic hygiene factors of doing a good job and doing it right and so on. And I know it says further in the report there are some staffing issues that perhaps hinder our ability, but we probably just need to look at the mix as to where are we getting those things right. And I think it's still in here, so I think it's when you get onto the report. The PSA stuff. I mean, it just feels like there is more we could do to make sure we are really capturing the learning and the actions, because it feels a bit not consistent across all areas as to how we are responding to or actioning the PSERF approach to learning, really. So it's just an observation. Sue.
So and I'd just like to understand, not necessarily now, but at some point in the future, what blockers, what's getting in the way of us being effective in that space. And then my other substantive point, as I read through the report, and it picks up on PISA, there seems to be a bit of a theme about the safeguard system not necessarily giving us what we want. And we've had a report at Audit Committee on this, or actually we were assured that quite a lot of work and investment had been put into that system and it was now working. So I'm feeling I'm getting a bit of contradictory evidence here. So again, not necessarily now, maybe something to take back to the Audit Committee, some assurance around actually that is not the right system, what we're doing to get it sorted.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. If there's that hand up.
I was going not to talk, but I'm glad that you mentioned it. We don't have. I think it's easier for me to come out and say, that I'm not the finance and the permanent member of the trust board in some ways. I do think that we need to have the tools from the trade. We're using humans to do stuff that should be done by legal systems. There are many legal systems out there, like AI that gives you a real-time intelligence on working safety and many other things. That include complaints, that include requests, and many other things. I think we need to really modernize.
Yeah.
And then we will get intelligence right. And then we will be doing things in real time. Which
Yeah.
I think is
I'm glad you said that. I did wonder whether, I mean, we wouldn't avoid the need for human involvement in reviewing and responding to duty of candour, dealing with complaints. But I agree, there must be tools that can support people, because some of the reference to areas where we're not meeting our target timelines alludes to lack of staff in certain departments that would support that. But if there are electronic tools that could assist, it's absolutely worth exploring those. I agree. Thank you. How does that get looked into in terms of exploring and perhaps?
We've had a committee report at Audit Committee so far, so should we use the Audit Committee to?
Brilliant.
follow up on that?
Yeah, that would be a good idea. Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so if there are no more questions on quality and safety, I don't see there are. Good. Let's move on to people and culture. And I think Caroline is kindly going to report back on that.
Well, for Les,
Indeed.
and taking the paper as read. Also in a position where Geneva, you've seen that pay gap and quality delivery system submissions. I don't steal with your thunder, and also spoke about NHS England's and GNC visits to improvements there. So there are two things that I wanted to highlight in particular. And we have the data around the Q2 submission around violence and aggression towards staff. And there have been sustained increases in violence and aggression, which also is accompanied by underreporting. So the true picture is probably very much worse. There have been some problems with using the current systems to report these things. There is work being done around that, and practically going to be having a look at this as well. And a reluctance to wear body worn cameras. So I think there's ongoing work with this around the data and reporting of it, but it remains a difficult issue. I don't really, there didn't seem to be any quick answers for the things, but Janine may wish to say more in a moment. The other thing was around the workforce dashboard I wanted to highlight. We've got sickness absence at 9.43%, stress, anxiety, and flu in particular. But quite a few of those cases are long-term sick, which are difficult to manage. They're formally difficult, hard work. So there's effort being put into the moment effort around managing those long-term absences. having earlier intervention being really key to us. Turn to working into these and such and such. But also a real need to triangulate the work that is being done in the workforce and dashboard between workforce turnover around well-being and such, and financial recovery. So those are some of the key highlights that giving major savings and particularly progression.
Yeah. So in terms of violence and aggression, this is where our increased focus on digital and digital modernisation will play a key part. So in terms of the safeguarding tools that we use, and a review and a tender around how we move forward with that, because at the moment our systems do not enable us to accurately capture violence and aggression. So what's happening is teams are flagging as no harm incidents that any person objectively would consider to be harmful. So we're looking at that at the moment, how we address that. Violence and aggression has now moved into being managed by Sean Green, our Director of States, and because they hold the security teams as well. And so we're in the process of actually relaunching our red and yellow card scheme, and conversations are taking place with individual teams that are being given the pack again of the red and yellow card, but also looking at after incident as well. So even where we haven't been able to, because the patient doesn't have capacity, where we haven't been able to provide a yellow card, it's recognising that for the staff member that still is fine. And so there's a need for a conversation and thinking about that. So recognising that we're not where we want to be, but feeling confident we have a plan to start to address that.
Good. Marta.
Since 9 weeks, it's something come up in terms of champions, and this is, I believe, a significant underreporting. This is staff that seem to have developed a very high tolerance of poor behaviour. Effectively saying, oh, well, you know, somebody will be feeling where, oh, well, they will be stressed. And the conversations I've been having with administrations, that's no excuse for bad behaviour. And I have spoken to Nick about an experience I've had elsewhere, which has made a significant dent in behaviour, because specific training is specific script that one used to everyone say, this is what you're saying, this is what you're doing, and we personally so you can actually respond almost automatically. And so when that's done, that one starts to see a significant reduction.
Helpful. Thank you. Ruth.
So I think there's a balance though. So yes, we shouldn't be tolerating the bad behaviour. There's some reasons, but it's not excuses. That can be understood. But I think there's also taking some accountability to when our staff do not manage this well and escalate things, because for lots of reasons, and most of that is they're short staffed, they're stressed. But I think it's sometimes easy to put it all one direction, that it's patient problem, when actually some of this is our staff and therefore our responsibility, because are we training them well enough, giving them time to do this, not just reflect on what's already happened, but really equipping them moving forward, and then would that have a reduction in some of our complaints? Because it is a two-way street. And yes, you're always going to have those patients that they just come in ready to fight from the offset. In a bad situation, but actually most of the time when you look at how events unfolded, there is something else fueling it, and it could be even how they perceive a response. And they've also got to be careful that we don't get robotic with responses, that we have to make sure that they're personal, and that some of that is really advanced communication skills.
It is.
Which is hard to train and deliver, I think, effectively. And body cams can feel like a big thing, but they are also a really significant barrier.
Yeah.
Like it feels like you're putting something in the way. Yeah. So it can feel like it's a safety thing, but actually, again, you can escalate the situation very quickly.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It often, in these issues, it very often includes, if not boils down to, communication. And I just wonder, does communication as a thing, and you know how good we are at it, does that feature in the ward accreditation criteria? Because that's perhaps something that we might want to strengthen.
Yeah, it does, but simply the focus about what different communication courses are available in different types of training and de-escalation. And we took that recently for TIC. So we're trying to come up with a kind of catalogue, but not one size fits all, that can meet individual requirements, whether it be advanced communication, or whether it's customer service. We are exploring that movement. And I think from what Mark earlier said about, you know, it is actually more complex.
Of course.
In terms of managing it. And we even talked a lot about the use of security for mental health patients as well, making sure that our interventions, while they may look like your supporting staff, are not antagonistic, antagonising some of the patients. So we're doing that piece of work as well, just to be clear that we're doing better.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. Dip, were you coming in?
Very quickly, we need that contacts. We are treating the patient before you make a contacts. I think that is exactly where the D15 comes from. What they do, they can actually pinpoint the area, the time, the space where you have the concentration event. And then you can do for this prioritization. If we try to do advanced communication skill for the listening member of staff, it would be ideal, but we can't afford it.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is to use our limited resources in an intelligent manner. So I would say that we need to use properly. And that those tools are available together. I think this is a really important thing to crack. There's nobody doing it.
Absolutely right. I mean, it's maybe one of those things that we bake into it. Some of the earlier conversation we've been having, it's about learning. And sometimes it's the sort of shared things that have gone well or how we tackled issues, but in the context of being a learning organisation and doing the learning around PSERF or learning events or, you know, all the different opportunities, we maybe need to just be a little bit more proactive about where we can include learning that enhances people's communication skills, and often learning from good practice as well as difficult situations.
We do very strong idea now from our staff of where the main hotspot areas are. Recognising to the point about 41 cameras. Some teams, such as the bed and site team, really welcome and they actively seek to use them. Other teams, as you say, find that it presents a barrier between them and the patient and actually escalate situations. And so what we're building is an approach to violence and aggression that is sensitive to the needs and the context in which we operate. But this, we do have a really good example actually from maternity of the use of the red card scheme and others actually thinking a patient. So I won't go into the detail here, but there was an incident that occurred and we supported the member of staff and we actively red carded the partner who'd been involved in the racial aggression against the member of staff. And posters that were made and developed. The staff now know that they can feel safe to speak up and be effective to tolerate that.
Good. I mean, it's continuous learning, absolutely right, but helpful to discuss. Thank you. I think we are ready then to move on. Oh, there was just one thing I wanted to just ask a little about positively. So it says that we've been invited to lead a national programme of work on newly qualified health registrants. So who are they? What category of people are health registrants? And how come we've been invited? It sounds like good news. It was worth highlighting.
So I think it'd probably be familiar to us board and called the Acceptship Programme.
Okay.
So we have long led the way in terms of our acceptship offering, which is that when you join us as a newly qualified nurse or AHP at band 5, you have a 6-month formal programme of learning and enabling to step up hopefully into band 6. And so what we're looking to do is to formalise that more generally so it can be replicable nationally. And we've been asked to lead on that by NHS England.
Is that because we're particularly good at it? Yes. Lovely, you see? always have to highlight the good things. So that's great news. Lovely. Thank you. I thought that was worth highlighting. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go on to the EDS report. Janine.
So the EPS 2022, I will take it as read, but just to give you context, this is an annual report. And actually this is a much streamlined version compared to EDS, believe it or not. And the things I do want to highlight, I'll take the paper as read. But this year's report really speaks to what we need to be getting from our improved digital access and our improved digital maturity. Because I think there are some areas, for example, around patient experience, where we haven't done as well as perhaps we even did last year. And that's because we weren't able to demonstrate clearly the different experience across different demographic groups. And with the EPR, as we've heard, the London Care Record and how we're engaging with that, I hope that for next year's EDS, we will achieve a higher score. So reaching the full potential of EPR will unlock much of our EDS 2022 progress. And that also leads us through into the health inequalities dashboards. How are we utilising this data? How are we more actively reporting and talking about it at all? I know we do pull out learning disability on the waiting list, but are there other groups that we should be looking at? And again, that will strengthen our response here and our ability to actually understand where people need additional support or where they could be doing more. Yeah. And that was what came through from our stakeholder panel as well. So the EDS is not just us marking our own homework. We have an external panel of stakeholders who give very generously of their time to review and to input in scoring. Violence and aggression came through also in this year's EDS 2022 report. And so what we need to be doing is thinking again, continuing the work, recognise that there has been a gap in our progress around violence and aggression as we made the handover from between the teams recording it. And also there has been a gap in our de-escalation training. We've been looking for a provider. Previously it's provided by BARTS, but they were unable to, they didn't have the capacity to support us anymore. So we're looking for another provider to make that available to us. And then sexual safety, we know we have much more to do there. And we are making progress, but not to the pace that we would want to. We were one of the early signatories of the Sexual Safety Charter. It's now in year 2 of us being in that charter. And so we're looking at how we can speed that up. But again, people disclosing and sharing instances of sexual violence or aggression is necessary for us to be able to understand where we can be doing more. In terms of how we're responding corporately, within the People Directorate, in my restructure, I've actually put in place an early resolution role, and that role aims to go into and work with individuals and with teams to look at team dynamics and think about team organizational culture. We've also enhanced the senior HR business partner function to enable getting more closer to source OD interventions. So not actually having to go out and commission from a separate OD team, but being able to draw that from the HR business partners. Those are the key bits to draw out there.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. Great data. Really about where we need to go next. I just wanted to ask about increasing this senior leadership commitment to EDI. And as a board, what can we do to support that? And I went on the Freedom to Speak Up visit to St George's yesterday. I went to Barking CDC a couple of weeks before, and it is really clear that people are crying out to see senior leadership. So yeah, what more can we all do to support that?
I think talking about it, I think that staff want to give us show interest in their lived experience. They want to then know that we are starting to understand and not dismiss the challenges that people face. I think it's that. I think when we write articles on the hub, referencing EDI, because I know that often it falls to, and Nick is very active in that, but it's how we can all start to speak more into this EDI space. I can't sit here and say and direct what we do, but.
But maybe the work we will be doing on developing an inclusion and belonging strategy will also support moving towards an improved score, because we would obviously hope to be able to score ourselves higher on quite a number of these metrics, and get to be achieving in many and excelling in some as well while we progress. So I think that would be an important enabler. And, you know, I would hope in articulating that strategy, or perhaps be a little bit clearer our commitment, and we'll include in that how we demonstrate that and how we make it real, rather than just sort of lip service and so on when it comes from the board, as Sue says. Caroline.
And I think if you're going to introduce a policy around early resolution as well, I think it'd be worth having a look at policy, because I had to do something really policy recently. It's been really written. I couldn't understand it. I'm a chartered fellow at CRPD, so if I can't understand it, I think, you know, think about some of these things in terms of flow charts and how they logically flow through, because these things have impact on other areas like the job planning and things like that. How do they all work together? So I think, you know, get a few people together, look through them, see how they actually play out in reality, rather than policy by itself.
Thank you. Good.
Thank you very much for the report. You mentioned, obviously, well, while we've been looking at learning disabilities, we know from the pandemic very poor outcomes for those particular groups. And when I was on quality committee here, I remember a very strong approach towards learning disabilities, and that's obviously had an impact. How do we go about thinking through what the other groups that potentially are at risk of either unintended or there are outcomes that they could be achieving for our services? Because if we look at all groups, that would help us, I think, and then that would probably identify the ones as a board we want to focus on. And my final comment on that, and sorry, this is lengthy, was that I think we were all Phil or just coming back when we were setting objectives for next year, and there was a quite long and really good discussion around inequalities objectives and what that means and how we measure it. Were you part of that?
No, it wasn't. But I'm conscious that it's one of the main things.
It's good to sort of understand the approach that we should be considering, and how we identify the ones that we want to work on. I mean, ideally, we want to make sure that everyone with any protected characteristic or any geography has the same outcomes. But we might have to take a more targeted approach about the ones that are most outliers from the median.
Thank you. Okay.
Welcome comment.
So I wholeheartedly agree with that, and I think, Sarah's point, the inclusion and belonging strategy and the development of that, it will involve us working very closely with colleagues in terms of the data and the insights that we can pull from the JNSC tool, our EPR, and all the London Care Record, in order for us to actually think about where we need to target. But it's not just about pulling data for the sake of data, it's about pulling data and understanding what we're going to do with that. And I think that's been our gap until this point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, good. Let's move on to the pay gap reports.
So I will again take the papers read our gender pay gap, which is our annual gender pay gap, and we choose to also publish our ethnicity and our disability pay gap as well as part of our commitment to equity and inclusion. So this year we are seeing progress continue in our gender pay gap. However, it is slow and it's incremental. And what's driving that has actually been that we're not seeing the increases in senior female representation. Or the inverse of that is that we need to be bringing in more men at entry level. But I think that would be a bit more of a hack than anything else. And so that we continue with that
to develop our action plan around senior representation, that tied into our broader recruitment and selection processes. As we'll be recruiting fewer people, we can pay more attention to the quality of our candidate pool, thinking about how we can build that longer term talent pipeline to start to address that gap. The ethnicity pay gap this year, what I want to highlight from this year's report is that for the first time, we are able to straight away provide that differentiated by ethnic group. So our ethnicity pay gap shows that BME people have a higher average rate of pay than white people. But then when you look at that differentiated view, you see that actually that difference is being carried largely by the Asian population. And then when you look at other ethnic groups, compared to white, they actually have lower representation in more senior roles. So the next step on is to further differentiate and split the Asian population by the demographics within that and build a deeper understanding. I think our recruitment data shows us what's driving that, which is that we have a very significant proportion of the senior doctors who are Asian men, who are Indian men, and that therefore is driving that because they are the highest paid group within the organisation. So further analysis will be coming to further disaggregate the data, enable us to build a more effective action plan. And for disability, we are seeing that pay gap start to close as well incrementally, but the challenge we face there is the declaration rates at the more senior level. So we need to continue to build a safe environment, people can feel safe to disclose that they have been massive
Don't worry. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. And I suppose the sort of in summarising it, we need to distinguish between, and I think it is mentioned in, so we don't have issues around not having equal pay for equal work for people in different categories, or looking at women being paid less than men for the same work, but it points more to equity of access to opportunities so that we see representation at different levels for all different categories of people who have protected characteristics.
Now, in our pay gap report, we are not carrying out
Exactly.
we haven't done one of those. And so what this is looking at is if you rank the levels of pay and you find where each of the quartiles fits within the demographic group, that is then the average pay that we then use. So it's not comparing role against role.
So it's it is an indicator about how equally or not balanced our representation is in the organisation at different levels of seniority. So although we call it the gender pay gap, it's more about what it tells us about distribution of people and whether there appears to be equality of access to senior roles and there's good representation in senior roles across all different groups. And it's less about what people are paid. That's just the route to understanding how we currently look profile wise.
And that's exactly it. And that's why being light-hearted when I talked about to address the gender pay gap, we could do the inverse and bringing more men into junior roles, because that's how the pay gap spreads.
Yeah, it might be just as difficult as letting women rise to the top in the anyway. Ruth.
Is there an appetite for those people that are maybe underrepresented to move into those positions? Right? Do they want to, or actually, for many reasons, they're happy with where they are? Because not everyone wants to go up scales for lots and lots of reasons. I mean, some of that's life work balance, right? So I think particularly for females, that they, or sometimes they perceive they don't want to move up because they think they wouldn't be able to have that balance, so they don't go for it. So is it that we're actually not providing access to positions, or are we not having people with the appetite to do it? Do we know?
I think so, based on, so our current staff survey data is evolving next week. But based on last year's staff data, so what staff did clearly tell us that there is a decline in progression and promotions and that it's not necessarily across. But within that, when you further analyse and have conversations with staff, it's a complex picture because for some staff, the more senior you get, you lose some of the additional enhanced payments that you may have access to. And so actually you might end up taking home less. And so they may choose not to. So based on our staff demographic, many of our staff are the main breadwinners in their household. And so they're having to do quite complex maths at points of actually, do I go for this promotion? And potentially risk, someone might get hurt or not. So it's a complex picture that but overall, our staff survey data tells us that staff feel like we could be doing more to ensure equity access to protection.
Yeah. Habib?
Thank you. On the gender pay gap, so I'm sorry to add more complexity to it, but it'd be good to understand how that's broken down by ethnicity and disability as well in that particular group. So that might show variances, and that might then impact upon the strategic actions that are needed.
And that's our commitment. So in terms of the next iteration of this report, it will be that, so in order for us to finesse our action plans, it will be to look at specific ethnic groups and the data cube around this really, so that we can better target our intervention.
Thank you.
Mark?
I'm just going to make a point about, sorry, part route. When we looked at this in the university promotions, these the women and particularly women from diverse communities who don't self-apply for these things, and we've just got to have an affirmative process going out saying we're doing really well, we should think about this. And we found that dramatically improves things. Then the other thing we discovered is people particularly on the lower wages, not wanting to cross the threshold where they lost benefits.
Yes.
So they won't apply because they'll cross the threshold.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, that teasing that out is quite hard.
Yeah.
And that's where the gender pay gap and all the pay gap reports are useful because they tell us where to be, but we're not able to draw firm conclusions from it.
And one of the other things that this wouldn't draw out, but just broadly as we think about it, career progression for people can involve sideways moves. So people want to continue to broaden their experience and their capability without necessarily always wanting to move up. And we need to make sure that's available to people as well. And that wouldn't come out of this data, but
I do want to we've made significant progress in senior representation of our Filipino community. So, our staff in the Philippines, for a long time, it was very clear that there was a bit of a sticky floor, and they were not progressing. When we looked at who was applying for positions, they were not applying. This demographic were not generally applying for promotion. But through the interventions and the active encouragement and our approach to management, we're seeing that gap start to close in terms of application, and we're then seeing that conversion rate into progression and promotion coming through as well.
brilliant. Thank you. It's helpful. Right, let's move on to the Finance and Investment Committee
Thank you.
and Performance Committee.
It always feels like when we get around to the big report that Matthew's covered a big chunk of it already. And then,
Always my aim of it.
absolutely. Yeah. It's always helpful to get that. And then poor Mike, who was here, after I'd spoken, there won't be much left for him to say. So we're not going to do that to Lorraine. So the two main
For once, it might be helpful, given it's our third grade.
No time for an easy ride.
So focusing on the areas that we've not been able to give full assurance. So obviously on meeting this year's forecast, we are as an organisation and the committee will receive assurance on pause on recruitment until July 2026 and a real rigorous approach towards the use of an agency at this moment as well. The focus is on the route to cash, to get the cash out, so that will meet our forecast, and we're able to satisfy the confidence that we need to provide to our external stakeholders. The other area where we sort of focused on at the committee is what needs to change for next year. And a number of things that will need to change. We'll certainly be having a focused discussion on fewer but more impactful transformation programs. So cost-cutting savings schemes, which bring together the triumvirates in the centre of them and budget holders have been responsible, SROs, for those bigger programs, and looking at finance quality and performance in the round. There's no point being fantastic on, say, on performance if we're not good on finance, etc., on some of the works that, some of the programs that come forward from there. And a much more rigorous approach towards just the routes to cash. And I think I'll be repeating that phrase a lot this year as well. And knowing that each one of those, month by month, is either delivering the cash or we've got assurance that the cash is on its way. If without that, it's not going to be, they're not going to be able to meet the requirements of the board setting our forecast for this year. The other area where we're not able to give full assurance was around performance, still recovering it from the move to EPR in November. And the reason why we're able to give significant assurance around that, but the reason why we understand what needs to be done is that we're absolutely aware that it's the work around diagnostics in radiology and pathology that are put that are the challenges, and also rebuilding the outpatients clinics and a focus on ED and non-elective. And Max is happy to cover that in the IPR. There was also a discussion around what National want to see of trust in terms of demand management. And I think it might have been at a meeting that Chair you attended where Jim Mackey spoke about I think he called it the Tesco club card, knowing your patient population, knowing what their behaviour is, and particularly at acute times of the year where there's going to be additional demand. And Ruth and I were having discussions earlier on about how with NHSE putting some money and some policy behind the relationship between ourselves and primary care, but specifically with GPs, and that partnership can only work on ensuring that those who are regular attenders and frequent attenders to ED are supported in a partnership between our consultants here and GPs out in primary care. We think we've got quite a way to go on that, but it's something that FIT wants to look at this year, because unless we get that right, we're just going to have those same people going down the kind of conveyor belt of into ED, then out into other types of more, expensive social care settings, etc., and then returning back to ED. So that's all I want to do in sort of setting the scene for Max and Lorraine.
Thank you very much. Shall we move straight on then, unless there are any comments or questions? Okay, so Lorraine, should we go to the finance report?
Of course. So at the end of month 10, which is the 31st of January, we have a position of a £52.7 million deficit. That is £49 million worse than our plan. As Matthew has already mentioned, those drivers of that variation from plan are a continuation of what we've seen in previous months, costs associated with delivering our activity over and above plan, with delivering our EPR and slippage in our CRP deliveries. We've got strong focus now, and I've discussed that in private board this morning, on delivery of our forecast outturn. which is forecast to be £65.1 million, and our work continues to deliver that. We've already heard about corridor care, so I won't repeat that, and we've just talked about the recruitment of these, but they are planks of delivering our forecast outcome. The nature of challenging financial positions, I'm sure members are aware, leads us to cash challenges. We have had cash support from NHSE in the 25-26 financial year that allows us to operate within minimum cash balances and allows us to see a route to the end of this financial year. We are just in the process ahead of Monday next week of applying for cash to support us in the next financial year so that we continue all of the usual payments that we would do, and our NHSE colleagues have been extremely supportive of that. Our capital plan totals £53 million this year. There is nothing on track. There is nothing to report as materially off track to that delivery, although worth noting, like often at this time of year, there is a lot of money for us to spend in the remaining months of the year, but that is on track for us to do so. Looking forward, and as Luke's already mentioned, that we are tightening and strengthening the focus on our CIP delivery. So delivery of our efficient and effective services within our financial envelope for next year, as we have agreed as part of our medium-term plan. We continue to work on that final plan, but we have set ourselves a CIP delivery target of £40 million. Through the month of March, we are working through ensuring that we start April with clear plans and clear understanding of where we've got risks and how we will mitigate those. This has already been mentioned, I'm new into post this week, but I'm starting to talk with our clinical groups and corporate directorates, and we'll get a regular rhythm of talking in detail about money, understanding from them what the things are that they need to unlock the changes that will deliver better patient care and deliver our finances. What we are not doing and what we have not set out a plan to do is deteriorate our quality and safety and performance at the expense of our finance. This is about making all of those three things come in harmony together. And the final thing I wanted to note was we're just about to work through some of our budget setting processes as well. So what we start to do is get real ownership through the organisation of budgets that people recognise and that they can work within, because that is a key lever to delivering our plan for 26-27. We're going to say anything more than that, but I have to take.
Lovely, thank you very much. Any comments or questions at this stage? Marta?
Says correct. The last few years have been very, what I would call macro loaded. The majority of spaces that's in our school which really doesn't actually make sense. No, it might have made sense in the past into the different family settings, but now we can look forward to a 2-year profile. So I don't think this is a question that can be answered today, but my ask is, what can we do to actually have a smoother path with our capital program so it's more front-end loading, so we can get the benefit of that investment or more of the community.
I think that's entirely agreeing with you on all of that. I don't know enough yet about how we set our capital plan 26-27, but that is absolutely where I am putting that, making sure we're investing in the right things to take risks, deliver us and financial support of our financial.
Max.
So I can respond to that. So I think we are taking a much more strategic view of what we're investing in and what pockets of money are available. We know that there is going to be slippage in some of the system capital allocation for next year because of the kind of projects that have been put on by some of the other providers. And we're getting ourselves into a position where our business cases, our plan for delivery is ready for as soon as that notification comes that there is capital to be used, we'll be there on there. So I think the team with Jeff, with Stuart and the finance team, I think we've got very strong hands on where we are with capital. So we will be doing everything we can do to bring things forward as the funding becomes available.
Thank you. So Mahbub and then Dip and then Mark.
It's a really good point that Martin made, because as part of objective setting, we had a discussion around what the enablers that are needed to deliver against our financial plans, and digital and capital, and particularly OD and culture change came as really important ones. So we're thinking that whilst in the past we get capital because other organisations have not been able to spend it and it's backloaded, the capital that we do have a strategic approach towards has got to have a return on investment on it as well, and it's got to be one of the enablers. We know that the other two enablers around OD and digital, that we've got, particularly in digital, a way to go as well.
Yeah. Were you coming back
Well,
on?
yeah, I was just, gonna say, I mean, one of the challenges with digital is the way in which some of the investments that we have, whether they are capital or revenue, and I think that's one of the things that the NHS is still sort of struggling with at the moment, is how are we actually turning national capital into things that's actually in the sports with our digital enablement. I don't know that we've got a route through that at the moment, other than, you know, the Homerton doing stuff and us benefiting from it since we're getting route currently, but yes.
Thank you. Dip.
Thank you to the medium-term plan that we submitted. You see a finding, but if you look at the care groups, sort of plan, that's on file. And all those individual care group plans are linked to money and capital money. I think this is a great opportunity. We rationalize it as to how everything comes together, and capital, the business, as well as cost improvement, budget.
Yeah.
They're very good at getting that.
Absolutely. Good
Very
point.
large is the, what we will do in 3 years.
Yes. Yeah. True. Mark.
I think it was reflecting on the conversation that's more about banking. It occurred to me that once pricing other clinical services elsewhere, people who are clinically in the service are not necessarily as financially focused as you guys who are doing this, looking greedy. And what I found, certainly in the University of John Ball projects, and if you talk to them, what happens is people start to realise very closely how much money they're spending on things.
Yeah.
And then if you show them that someone that's down the road is spending a lot less to do more, they start to adjust their behaviour.
Yes.
And then the other incentivization to make the saving is to say, you know, if you make targets, we might be able to do within the end of the year to do this project. I just think it's working well for me in the university. I almost don't have to do anything. The others do it all because basically they're all scared of whether they're going to be worse budgetary position than the others. And I'm sorry, I didn't mention this morning because I would have been resoundingly on board. But I really do think that we have to give ownership of some of these financial challenges out to the teams. And when they own those, my experience is they will be able to. I think exactly if you understand.
Yeah.
Yes, Lorraine alluded to that this morning in terms of the sort of benchmarking internally as to those teams who are making the greatest progress.
I'm sure there will be digested, but
No.
I think it probably requires one.
I have yet to find a clinician in any organisation in 20+ years in the NHS who isn't interested in money. It's just how we talk to them about it.
Yes.
And you show it to them, you show it to them.
Yes.
And it was a competition.
Because
Yes.
if they don't feel their pain, it becomes a different relation.
And we just need to get the balance right between encouraging celebration of progress and good behaviour and not naming and shaming in a way that is a negative. So it's all
And it's
appropriate cultural. Exactly. Yes.
Process. So,
Brilliant. Good. Sounds easy then. We look forward to it. Good. Thank you. I think that's us on the finance report. So should we have the workforce improvement update, Janine?
So I think this is just Lorraine and I really supporting each other in this. So what we saw in January was overall our WTE was moving in the right direction. Albeit not rapidly as planned would need from us, and absolutely driven by efficient in our substantive workforce, and to speak a bit about what's underlying that minutes.
In January, the reason why we did see our temporary staffing spend go up, and that's because we saw a spike in corridor care in January, and I know that we've talked a bit about the progress that has been made and that's been recognised for, and that line is sustaining. So I would hope that going forward, we start to see that reduction in temporary staffing continue. Our agency spend remains low. I think we hit our lowest ever agency level in January. So that shows good discipline among teams. And we know where the opportunities sit. So within the pack at page 160 in the overall pack, where we look at the opportunities for recruitment, we know that there are some areas where, for example, within nursing, ED, nursing, specialist area, we need to continue to recruit band 5 nurses, and that gives opportunity around releasing bank spend. Our overarching vacancy rate, yes, whilst it's gone up, for some staffing groups, it remains significantly higher than our overall figure. So Nick is working on that plan, and that's part of the teams that are our process around making it through the freeze. We'll be looking to pull out some of those critical roles or statutory roles that we need to ensure patient safety. We'll make it through the freeze, and we'll be continuing to recruit to those. In terms of what's been driving the reduction, this month in January, we saw more of our EPR workforce exit. We're starting to see the outcome of the corporate restructures that took place earlier on in the year in terms of staff exiting, and so that will continue. I know, for example, in the People and Culture Directorate, there are people who are working their notice at the moment, so we need to see that reduce. In terms of some of the key drivers of the additional spend, sickness absence, for example, we've introduced a new approach where sickness absence in the first instance is referred and supported by occupational health. We've enhanced the offering from within occupational health, so we have now we have a role that aims to keep people at work when they return after long-term sickness, so a bit of a rehabilitation role, which I hope will continue to have a positive impact. And regarding the overall risk controls through the productivity improvement group and other ways, the clinical groups are holding that, and they are working on their plans to address and make sure that they are living within their financial means. And in terms of the policies and how we apply those policies, you can see from our ER data that we're continuing to see a decline in the number of employee relations cases. And we're, again, through the early resolution work and through enhanced local business partnering support, aiming to continue to see that improve, because those ER cases are often the tip of the iceberg in terms of the underlying culture within a team. So recognising that, I'd like to
Thank you. Got 2 points, if I may. The first is sort of a tonal style one, which on the exec summary in the first paragraph, it talks about managing the workforce, improvements and so on. And then it says, removing this waste is integral. I just thought style-wise, to categorise any of our adjustments and refinements as waste might not be what we intended to convey. So I think that's just a bit careless. And then we talk about, obviously, the biggest cost is bank. I'm just interested, I think it's slide 181, in nursing and midwifery, all the way along. So we've got all the detailed breakdown or the categories of bank expenditure. And the biggest one every time is other. And given we've done mental health, clinic, corridor care and sickness, I was intrigued to know what other covers when it is biggest by a long way. Okay. Yes. And yet it's our biggest area of extra cost. And so, I mean, if we're just looking at the numbers, tackling that would have more impact on our WTE than corridor care. Okay.
So we've done all our paper stuff, and depending on the case, for some, there will be other
I'm sure, but just because it's such a significant line in its own right, I think understanding it, and yeah. But nevertheless, as a category of excess spend, it's probably one we need to pay attention to, and prioritise if we can, or at least understand it. Thank you. Caroline.
When you record those, when they've gone to DT, do they come off your list as the to understand the state of that? So
I think it's capturing everything that we would hold as open, and if a case is pending with ET, it's still be open for us because we're actually super busier than ever, preparing for the tribunal, so it's only be at the end of the tribunal process that it goes to close.
I think as well with the, I mean, you're showing reduction in cases here, which is very, very rare in places at the moment. Most organisations seem to be seeing an increase in complexity, particularly with the use of AI. Longer submissions, people might be willing to do submissions. Also, rather, as you see, well, it takes a lot of time. And I think cracking a lot of the long-term sick is a squeeze that we can get through the ER cases. So I would argue, with any that there is, measure that return on getting people to deal with those cases. The question, the particular question I had was around recruitment freezes. They don't sound very good, but are there any positive consequences? Last time called Matthew, because we hang on to every word, Matthew, we're speaking about behaviour change. Sometimes we think it could be negative, but result in a positive behaviour change. And I wonder with the recruitment freeze, were there anything we're seeing that's actually positive about it?
So let's start with the recruitment freeze. This is going to, probably about to say out loud, I'm actually quite excited by the opportunity of recruitment freeze brings, because, Alan, my director of work for, he's, recruit less, recruit better, I think is his strapline. And so it means that we can put more attention to the quality of our recruitment process. We can accelerate our move to values-based recruitment, which I believe didn't mention we've already started to do with our consultants. But if you have fewer opportunities coming up, you can pay more attention. And when we look across trusts who do particularly well in terms of culture, they don't necessarily invest loads of OD, but what they do is invest in making sure that the people they bring in reflect the values and the behaviours that they want to see in each division within the organisation. So we're going to lean into that. And the other aspect that I think is really positive is if we will have to do this, to move to internal first. As Matthew often talks about, we've got a significant pool of talent who've been through apprenticeships, who've had learning opportunities, and who've then had to go back to their previous job without any opportunity to really use that learning. By creating internal opportunities in the first instance, we'll be able to create pathways for succession. And within that, we want to be intentional about that. So while overall I've reduced the size of the people directed by the equivalent of £1 million, we have invested in talent, so we can more actively identify who are those people in that pool, what are they interested in, and how might we support them to the next opportunity or to the sideways move that interests them. So I think it can be and it should be presented to our staff as an opportunity for them to grow and progress. And in terms of ER, getting to the grip of things early is going to have to be in the heart of this. I do take your point about the cost that's associated with going off sick, the dip in discretionary effort when you have people disgruntled and unhappy. There will be a cost. I think it previously been estimated that 20% if you don't feel a sense of belonging. Yeah. And so what we're looking to do again with the restructure is to embed closer to within the groups. We're not, because of the vacancy freeze, I'm not in a position to fully move to that model, so they're still holding ER centrally. But the plan is that we will eventually look to move ER into the clinical group line so that we have greater control.
Sounds good. And you're absolutely right. I mean, if we are we're growing our own, and people we are investing in their development and their training. We want to reap the rewards of that rather than feel we've funded the training for them to go elsewhere because they couldn't get the progression or the career development that they were wanting. We've just financed someone else's gain, which is a double hit. So it helps our retention. Yeah, well, we don't mind people moving around positively, but we don't want it to be that they're leaving because we couldn't support their continued development and career progression, which would be a negative. Of course, we're one HS, but we want to win. So thank you. Anything else on workforce? Oh, Dick.
Just want to point out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And it makes a huge difference. And it's going to help solve so many of our problems. But having the right people doing the right things at the right level just makes sense. So yes, thank you. Thanks, Dip. Good. Okay, let's move on to performance.
Thank you. So I'll just go sort of very briefly through some of the headlines and see a number of points that have been raised by Matthew and Mahbub already. So starting on UEC, our all types performance for January, we've achieved 75.4% against the 78% target, which isn't where we would have wanted to be, but I think as Matthew's pointed out in his report, still puts us 8 out of 18 in London, so it's not so bad. Our type 1 performance is the area that's still the biggest concern for us, which only achieved 51%, and we will be obviously trying to focus on that through the work that's going on in the flow, sort of headed up by the corridor care piece, but sort of through the rest of the organisation over the next few months as well. There has been an EPR impact in some of the data that we've got, particularly for type 2 performance in ophthalmology and also in gynecology as well. So there is still that adjustment to the new system, which I think a lot of the clinical teams and the operational teams are feeling at the moment. We talked at FIC quite a lot about the pilots. I think there was a comment made about more pilots in an airport. We have very much UBC pathway at the moment. New pilot in IA to try and reduce waiting times for initial assessment. Pilots with CCT and LAS around their frailty line usage. We've got the pilot in FSDEC to go to trolley care from what's been a bit more of a bedded unit over sort of the last months while FSDEC has been in place. And a piece around weekend discharges as well, all of which we assured the committee are sustainable changes that we can make. So there are external funding to sort of pump prime, and we'll then be looking to reallocate resources internally to support going forwards, or it is just a reallocation of resources that we've already got to better improve our processes. So I think there's some green shoots there. We've already talked about the impact that the UEC work specifically in terms of mix has on their chronic care numbers. There's still more work to do, I think, on the mental health side. We have had a deficit in mental health and some further work we need to do. But now, as we know, I think effectively acknowledge that there's more work that needs to be done, and we could be going faster on that. But it will be that partnership working with NAF that will help us get to a better position for mental health. For planned care, which is usually a bit more of a jewel in our crown in the performance piece, has been really significantly affected by the EPR go live. Our RTT position, I think there's a misprint in the exec summary, so it's 64.76 in January, which was 2% down from December. And it is our lowest that we've had since November 2024. There are a number of factors that are involved in this. Again, sort of the operational slowdown that we experienced, particularly through the outpatient element of care, and also some of the way that the EPR system was configured. So we've had to do that clinic rebuild work in outpatients, which is now completed, which is good. There's then been a sort of a knock-on which has affected our cancer performance as well around our diagnostic delivery. So our radiology teams have essentially had a double go live with both a new EPR system on the side of the requests coming in, and then a new RIS-PAC system for them to process the requests to do the reports and various other bits and pieces. And that's a big slowdown on some of our treatment in both cancer and in RTT as well. We have got fortnightly meetings with the regional team to look at our RTT performance. We've got another one on Tuesday next week. We've got a trajectory week on week that we are submitting our recovery essentially, and we're under quite a lot of support from them. We are contributing to the national sprint to try and deliver more activities to clear long-waiting patients for both outpatients and in our elective and daycare spaces as well. They have also provided us with national funding to support work with the independent sector to get additional capacity onto in this part of the year so that we can get our waiting lists down. So we're taking up every opportunity that we can do. We've got booking parties going on internally in order to make sure that we're getting outpatient appointments booked and that activity is flowing through in the way that we would expect. And the team are keeping that under really close review, as well as the clinical groups as well that deliver a lot of the activity. Our DMO1 is probably just to sort of lead on from the point around the diagnostic challenges. So we are not reporting DMO1 externally at the moment due to issues with the data quality and the volume of validation that needs to be done, just because we're essentially getting the data up in a different format to what had been coming through from Careflow and other platforms that we were using before the go live. We're hoping that we are going to get DMO1 position out by probably this month. I would have thought, if not the beginning of the next financial year. But that is causing some concern. The data that we've had so far doesn't look like we've had quite a big deterioration in diagnostic performance, which we might expect. Matthew's mentioned the pathology strike for next week, which we are trying to minimise the impact it will have on elective performance going forwards. And I think that is probably the main bit. So it's not a rosy picture, but we are doing the things we need to do to get into a better position.
Thank you. I love the idea of a booking party. It sounds like fun.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
How we get invited to one of those. So one of the things I wondered in the context of the booking parties and prioritisation, are we continuing in relation to that approach to be doing equality impact assessments? And I'm thinking in particular of the great long list of gynae, obviously women significantly feature there.
Yeah.
And so are we prioritising that from an equalities perspective?
So the data on gynae is actually probably, even though it is our most challenged specialty, both in RCT and cancer, has probably had the best improvement in performance, I think, out of the main challenge specialties that we've got over the last few months. We do review the data, the gender equality piece for patients waiting on a regular basis through one of our health inequalities and planned care group. I think there's more work for us to do. We're definitely focusing our efforts on gynae just because we know the position that it's in. They've got independent sector support, and we are providing them with sort of additional transformation and improvement resources to get their pathways working as effectively as possible. So it's definitely high on the list, and we are seeing some green shoots, I think.
And then the other one that stood out for me, and it will be my ignorance perhaps, but one of the longest wait categories seems to be people waiting for pain management. And I just thought that seems really mean. So is there anything we should be or could be doing to ameliorate people's pain? Because to wait a long time simply for that seems cruel.
Yeah, so there's a particular complexity with the pain pathway, the number of professionals that will input into that patient's care. We have had a challenge last year where we had a number of vacancies consultant anaesthetists that were also providing pain services. So that slowed down our approach to getting those patients through. We are now fully recruited in pain. So I think the waits are coming down. Those patients will generally be being cared for on a pain management regime elsewhere, but are sort of being sent into us for a
trying to improve, they're not just living in pain that we're not dealing with.
Sort of pain management, which may be psychological or physiotherapy or drugs or procedures that we would do internally. So they won't be just out left out. Yes.
Thank you. Ruth.
Just like saying, so gynae wise, there's also lots of plans for the left shift.
Yes. Yeah.
In a way that I think there isn't in some of the other specialties. Talking to Catherine, there's definitely some pathways in that we can take out to the community and do really well.
Yeah.
But it does need some support from the trust, particularly around. I mean, even things like we've literally got loads of GPs really keen to fit things like coils and implants, but we haven't got a trainer to get us competent for licensing for that. But if the trust can provide that, which Catherine and I can, then actually we can shift loads. Which would make such a difference for women and really reduce some of our waiting times. I think the thing about pain management, and I think it's something we haven't done well in the trust, is to understand pain management has two kind of strands to it. There's interventional pain management, which is what we focus on more in the trust. And then there's the more holistic pain management that, again, really should be in the community. If you're not doing a surgical intervention, I'm unsure why you need to be under a pain consultant. Here. So again, it's definitely something we could be moving out and really doing a more MDT approach to it. Those services are in place with much shorter timescales on them, but because they've gone that way, to the pay team because there doesn't seem to be any other way to do them. They're kind of stuck, and it does feel mean, and they're not looked after, and they probably are on some pay machines. The fact they've been referred means they're inadequate, and they're not good enough. They're not getting that MDT, holistic approach, which places like Guys and Tommies do particularly well. So I think we could do some learning from them. I think radiology is still a real concern for us. I think Imran's making great progress with the radiology team, but there is still a bit of a culture issue there, with a lot of blame put down for things that actually are to do with the reasons why they're now not getting to where they should be. And I think there's with EPR, there's a lot more scope to make us far more efficient in radiology to ensure diagnostics are done pre-appointment.
Yeah.
And they're often not. So it would be kind of good that we start to look towards that now that EPR is embedded moving forward.
Thank you. Helpful. Thank you. I mean, it certainly sounds like just our review of our data helps us think about areas to explore for opportunities. Good. Some of it will be the productivity stuff that we can't cash in. However, lovely. Good. Okay.
Let's move on then. We are on to the audit and risk committee. So Sue, thank you very much. Okay, so we met in February. So literally just at the point that external audit were readying themselves to start the audit for the year. So it's always it's a little bit like the calm before the storm. We're doing all the planning, but we're not actually doing it at that point. As colleagues will know, we've had a series of years where we've had particular challenges around audit of capital areas and PFI and accounting in that space. So we've had a year of doing an awful lot of reviewing of how our financial governance is positioned and what our processes and procedures are, to the point that our external auditors feel confident that we are doing the right things in the right way. And if anything, we are slightly ahead because they provided us with the samples and we've already given them the evidence at the point of this committee. So it's feeling very positive. The work that Chris Randall, who I should give a big shout out to, has been doing in terms of strengthening processes and procedures is excellent and is on track. And we kick the tires quite heavily of simple little things like the scheduling of stock takes, the engagement of pharmacy, all of those groups of people for whom audit is not the be all and end all, comes around once a year and can sometimes catch them unawares. We were thoroughly assured that everyone is ready and raring to go. So a positive outlook for external audit, I would say, but the proof will be in the pudding now that they're underway. We also received a report from Linda about who's got to do what and when to get the annual report and accounts out. This is always a major logistical exercise for a number of our colleagues to pull all of the data together. We've got a clear timetable. We're aware where things have changed because there are new requirements in terms of climate reporting and sustainability, but we are aware and lined up to do all of that. And we've also delegated some of the annual report performance data to Ben, I think. Is that right? Yeah. So we've got an extra player on the pitch as well. So again, we're feeling confident around all of that. In terms of internal audit, we received 3 reports. Each of those 3 reports had partial assurance. So there were a number of recommendations. One report was about freedom to speak up, and it was felt that there was the possibility of improving how we can learning and triangulate that and bring it to bear more broadly across the organisation. So some enhancement around embedding and learning. Our internal auditors did highlight that when they benchmarked us to other organisations, we had higher reporting rates. It's interesting, you can play that one of 2 ways, can't you? So higher reporting means we've got a much stronger freedom to speak up culture and people are willing to speak up. That's good news. or it could mean that there are more things that they have to speak up about, and that's not a good thing. Given where we have come from, I interpret it as a positive thing that people are feeling more willing and more ready to raise matters that are of concern to them. But I would say, as taking my audit hat off and putting my footsuit hat on, this is something that we've absolutely got to keep pushing. What happens in times of financial challenge is that people sometimes batten down the hatches and don't talk about things. And we as a board really need to emphasise we need people to keep talking, keep sharing concerns with this. It's really important to hear that. There was a report on accounts payable. There were some recommendations to improve. And I think the biggest point there is since we moved our accounting systems across to Barts as a shared instance, we haven't quite got right our clienting of that relationship. So we can do some work to strengthen that. And then the third report was about cost improvement plans, which we've talked a lot about. And the recommendation, which is one I think we all as a board agree with, is we need fewer larger schemes and less smaller schemes, purely because it's very hard to drive forward an array of smaller schemes. And given the scale of our challenge, we need things that we can wrap our arms around. All three reports very useful, but because they give partial assurance and they will inform our annual internal audit opinion, we are veering towards an annual opinion of partial rather than substantial assurance. This is the first year of this firm doing our internal audit. My experience is that often in the first year of a firm, you do end up getting more likely to get partial because they're familiarising themselves with the organisation. So I think for us, the important thing is to listen to the recommendations, learn what they're saying and robustly implement what they're saying so that we can move forward positively. We also looked at the annual plan for internal audit. We looked at it very much from a position of, does it cover off our BAF risks? Is it looking at areas that are key to us as highlighted in the BAF? And largely it is. And I would commend the executive on very proactively adding into the plan the things that they themselves are worried about. And of course, if you put on the internal audit plan the things that you're most worried about, you are more likely to get recommendations and you are more likely to get partial assurances because you already had a concern in that space. So it takes a level of courage and self-awareness to do that. And I commend our executive team for that. We were broadly happy with the plan. The only area that it misses in terms of BAF risk is partnership risk. And it's quite hard to get your arms around. So I've agreed with Nick Atkinson that we will keep a watching brief on that and think how we can get assurance in that space and whether there are any opportunities as we go forward with that. But broadly, we were happy with that plan and did agree it as a committee. Counter fraud work continues, nothing I particularly want to highlight there. The risk management policy came to us to review, but will come here shortly for approval. Work on the corporate risk register is continuing to improve every time we see it. We are now seeing risks being actively managed, reviewed, moving on, which is how it should be. They should not live there forever. Things should change as a result of them. And Sean earlier on, when we were talking about space plans here, said if we implement these plans, we will close out 4 red risks. That's what it's about. It's about using it as a management tool. So really, really encouraging work happening in that space. And then there are the usual suspects on our agenda: losses and special payments, SFI waivers, and trust seal, which again comes here under its own right. So that was the audit committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Lots of really good stuff. Support what you say about being speak up and the sort of double-edged, careful what you wish for. But I think to add to what you said, one of the other strong indicators of a good speak up culture is the fact that almost all are declared they're not anonymous speak ups. And
We've had a huge improvement.
Also an indication of a shift towards a much more open and comfortable culture and being
Yeah, I think we'll take that one as a positive aspect. In terms of the triangulation and so on, I think again, some of that, it points to sort of the conversation having earlier, generally learning, our sort of learning from and our learning culture. I think there's something, just a number of elements we've covered today just point to that. I think we could get to 1 minute in that regard as well. Good to hear we're making good progress on the audit and readiness for audit. I'm just remembering last year's audit, which of course quite soon after I'd arrived, but I remember there were quite a lot of things that had been previous recommendations from previous audit that were kind of still to get that, still to be done, still to progress, and what have you. Are they included in the areas where we've made progress, or do we still have quite a long tail?
So if colleagues will recall, the year before's audit finished sort of a month before that year's audit. So most of the recommendations were only received after they could be of value in that year's audit. So it looked like work hadn't been done to implement them, but the reality was the time available to implement them was insufficient in those circumstances. The specific piece of work that is referred to in the report, the financial governance review, is the gathering together of all of those recommendations, the creation of an action plan to deliver against all of those recommendations. We've brought in a firm to do a detailed deep dive to identify down to individual processes such as bank reconciliations and how they are done and where they're done. So a very detailed piece of work. That's what that financial governance progress report is about. So it captures all of those things you've asked about, and it is well progressed. Many of those things will be fully implemented by March, and some of the less priority ones will be implemented by the end of April. So we'll all be in place.
And I agree with you, new auditors generally like to show their value by finding lots of stuff for us to payments on. But are there any consequences for us to be mindful of if we are likely to have partial assurance rather than submission?
I think we've had it before. I think the important thing is that we demonstrate that we are actively working on the recommendations and look to move forward. But actually, as a learning organisation, if all the areas we put up are ones where we want recommendations to improve, I almost anticipate that that's a possible outcome.
That's good. Good. Thank you. Any other comments on this? Martin?
Just reflecting on the comment you just made, Sarah, I think there's a positioning issue we have, because considering the response we got with our medium-term plans and, you know, the influence that we are not putting enough effort into managing our finances, a limited assurance and opinion, I think, means that we have to be prepared to evidence why it is our internal controls are strong.
So the internal audit opinion is very wide. So it picks up not just on financially, 1 or 2 of the audits will be financial internal controls. It includes, the plan for next year includes corridor care, for instance. It will include, it's included freedom to speak up. So it isn't necessarily an indication of poor financial control.
I know that. I know that. I'm just talking about the optics for the ICB and NHS England, alongside the commentary they've made back to us, that I just think we need to be prepared. I'm not saying that we're doing anything wrong. I'm just saying we need to be prepared.
I would feel confident in defending this issue.
Some wording, having been in this situation many times, some careful wording in the AGS is how we can get
that. Thank you very much. Right, Linda, use of the trust seal.
Yeah, so we're just seeking ratification that we've used the seal on 4 occasions since the last report to board. 3 times on different building contracts, one relating to Ashfield refurbishment and others on firework, and also the transfer of 3 properties relating to a charity, which actually you'll see that come back again in the register in a future report, because due to legal matters, we've had to reseal as we've gone through the process of the charity transition. So it's just for ratification that we've used the seal plans.
Yes, and we don't need to ignore this. Okay, so Nick, the risk management policies, to you.
Yes, I think many on the board have already seen this committee in previous subcommittees of the board, and we've the other internal and policies as well, and governance as well. I mean, I personally think it's a great policy, very heavily supported by Linda and Kerry and her team. We've already started to make some of the implementation and the training around how we're going to use the policy. And as Sue's rightly said, you know, in terms of the corporate risk register, we've got it there. So really just here for final approval.
I do think going to be comprehensive. Is there a sort of easy to use guide?
Yes, there is a,
There is a handbook.
yes, I saw it. Yeah, that's
I think Sarah, a bit. Typically, we have gone through our risk maturity review. And there's a feeling that in this particular policy, we wanted to reflect the change and to that review that we've done. So we have put a lot of detail in there, but there's a well challenged on that. The audit committee, but may reviewed it. Yeah.
Absolutely right. No, it's thorough and it's very much exclusive. But for those who might need to use it on a day-to-day basis, who wouldn't have time to be able to find guidance and stuff. Brilliant. Thank you very much. So a lot of you have had time to study it in detail. I have been originally, it's been read well and it is clearly very thorough. But are there any comments? Other than I would say thank you, because it has, I know it's been a huge piece of work, and I know we had external support at one point, so you so I know the you and team have done a huge amount of it, so thank you very much. And have a tool that we can use that is dynamic and allows our risk management to be dynamic. So that's exactly where we should be. So if there aren't any comments on it, are people happy to go through the risk management policy? Okay. Right, end of quarter 3 annual goals review. That's one that's with you.
And there's plenty of detail on that one. It's as we have done previously, as we've largely stuck down the goals we've had. I know people are currently working on what we've implemented here as well. But I think this is a relatively familiar material from the content of our board discussion. Obviously, so better for you.
So does anyone have any more questions on the annual goal? Thanks, David.
It feeds it's all material that we do.
Very lightly, because it was at the end of the pack. I didn't really understand it. The summary dashboard, I just don't. Got colours on it, and then like the first 2 columns are the same colour. But then I thought, does that mean the other ones are going to add up to those 2 ones? Didn't.
Which page?
Annual goals review, end of Q3. Except because I'm on like individual ones rather than the pack.
So we're on page,
That's 272.
274 page or whatever, 291. Yes, it starts, yes. Oh, sorry, the summary dashboard, yes.
Yeah.
Each of the goals has got objectives for the next level down. Then of that, each of the objectives, they've got a series of high-level deliverables that sit underneath that, which there are a range which we are, I think, trying to reduce for next year so it's clearer. And then of those, each of the deliverables, then it's a rating based on how well we've done. So it should all add up to.
Oh, so the 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the 52 is the total of the 4 columns to the right of it.
Yes.
So the total number of high level deliverables, which sums to 52, is the total of the red, green,
Yeah.
The green, amber, red, and data unavailable to the right bit. Ideally, that we could have bolded that column.
Yes.
I mean, that's very good.
No, that's the end. And then just do that.
We take to our financial planning.
And the data unavailables, why are they unavailable?
So I think there's been I've talked quite a lot about goals in the last few boards, but I think there's been a challenge around some of the metric setting that we put in, or how we were charting our delivery as some things we said. So I think for the ones particularly that are in the performance capacity I look after, I think they're things that we can't point to metrics and say we wanted to be, and we are timing up next year, so let's get clearer.
There's some EPR stuff in there, so two of the lines, because of the EPR rollout, we've had DQ issues, that means we can't do returns. So in the risk impact stuff, for example, that's one of the lines in there. We've been able to do a Q3 report because we don't have any confidence in the data because of the EPR rollout.
And again, just from my understanding, so moving towards next year, having done like that summary this year, do you feel like we've got too many?
Yes.
And how many? How much do we need to really? They've got to be SMART goals, right? Like, which we did kind of try, but clearly, I mean, 4 not even being able to be given data anyway.
That is an EPR. That would
Issue.
not be an issue in Q3. It wouldn't have been an issue on. It's been an issue because of the EPR rollout.
So.
Each of these sectors have done individual reviews of their objectives next year, and I think that they can decide partly because we report quite a lot of data through the IPR already, so it's about trying to make sure that this was really headline things that showed a strategic direction and were sort of real measures of where we're going. So I don't know, Linda, when we're bringing that back. Is that in April?
That was my next question.
Yeah.
It's on the 8th of April.
Yeah.
Meeting. So
That'll be the new
target. Okay, so we're in the middle of a process of reviewing the objectives that sit against the goals, high level deliverables, how we're going to report, and we'll see reporting on each of those so that we can map the really to learning from previous years so that we can do that in that process at the moment.
I think, Caroline, this was around on page 280, some of the more granular detail around increasing diversity to ensure adequate representation at all levels, and particularly nursing midwifery. And I'm still struggling slightly with the high level deliverables, and I think being quite harsh actually around the tiny movement with Nigerian and Filipino staff members there. I'm just questioning how relevant is that still, or is it something that can be broadened out rather than picking? Was there a reason for picking those two particular groups?
So I think this was a hark back to what the data was showing us in terms of the likelihood to progress and promote. And this came about, the need for specific focus came out of the People and Culture Committee conversations about actually can we focus. But it may be that you're right, that if you're focusing in on one group where underrepresentation has been, one person moving on to a promotion elsewhere means that we've absolutely missed the target. So it may be that we're measuring, we need to look at it, but maybe that we're measuring too granular a detail, but I think we might need to revisit the conversation.
I'm just wondering how relevant it is now. So that's one we can pick up and keep in contact.
So in terms of an overview, this is Q3. However, to feel we have only achieved success in 8 out of 52 of our target goals doesn't feel terribly successful. And I didn't get a sense on reading through all of the detail that we thought we were going to convert many of those lower scores into successes by the end of Q4. So as an outturn, it isn't a particularly impressive picture. And I think we need to be honest about that and
think, what are we going to do differently? And yes, we might feel we need fewer particular goals, but you don't lower the target to give yourself a better chance. So I know it's not, that isn't the suggestion. We might want greater clarity, and therefore fewer goals that we can understand and are measurable and so on. But I think in our approach, and we've had the conversation because the organisational goals meetings we had over the last few weeks, beginning of Q4, starting to try and pull together a plan, didn't give me a lot of confidence that at that point, in the way we did it, and I guess work's being done, we were developing a coherent plan that hung together and was giving us confidence that we were going to achieve significant progress. So I think both anticipating where we're going to turn out this year, seeing this and how it looks, taking the work we've got so far in terms of the organisational goals, there's a bit of work to do over the next 3 weeks to get us in a position where we're starting into the new financial year with organisational goals that we think are appropriate, achievable, coherent, and fit well alongside the financial, because we also need to anticipate as we are doing the work that Lorraine started and we were discussing with the clinical groups, groups we did this morning. There will be other priorities, initiatives that we proposed that could railroad some of these broader. So we just need to be mindful of what are we setting ourselves as we go into. We've got a lot to achieve. We're ambitious for what we want to achieve, but I would like us to think we're going to turn out the year with a sea of green next year, coupled with improvement and achieving the financial goals. So feel there's work to be done.
So, and there is one issue, which is what's the progressing ones? Showing it's progressing because we've designed them so that they're either achieved or not at the end of the year. So that's how we monitor something during the year. So for example, the one around social value in contracts and issues around banking agency staffing usage, we are currently delivering on them, but because it's a end of year target, to say reduce vacancy by 40%, it's showing this progressive. So the progressive ones could all go one way or another at the minute, which is possibly an indication that maybe not as in-year smart as they might be.
Okay. Yeah.
So they sit between two stools. I'll tip one way or another. The money ones will largely not tip in the way for it.
I think it's also fair, some of these targets, they weren't picked out of thin air, but I think we just didn't know quite where they were going to be. And it's like the delivery of 600 apprenticeships was obviously really aspirational, but then you've got the financial pressures of how many apprenticeships do you offer if you can't offer them full-time jobs at the end. So, and maybe therefore we should also be having a break point within the year where we reevaluate some of our targets because of other things that come in. So we're not looking like we're failing at the end of the year. Actually, we're being responsible with some of those targets because of other pressures. I mean, I'd say 100% of managers completing manager's license. I mean, I'm hopeful in your audit, don't ever do 100% because you've got turnover. You just can't do that. So 100% was always going to be unrealistic. And actually 86%, I'd say is, I think that's really, really good. But I think this is a real learning exercise. And this is the first time we really have done this like this. So I think there's a lot of to go towards, which is really positive.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think maybe some of it does come down to what we measure. So, you know, aspire for almost unachievable and achieving, you know, the 90% position on a target might well still be excellent performance. So we need to be clear where we are setting ourselves a really overly ambitious, but recognize what good looks like, and somehow how we reflect that in the scoring might help us be older and get to the end of next year about how it looks. Because you know, if we turn out with 8 out of 52, we'll feel like we haven't done very much. And as I'm being harsh, but that probably doesn't genuinely reflect the progress made. And so somehow we need to have language and scoring that gives a better indication of good work when good work has been done. Not over to philosophy. If you were.
This is not a criticism, but a learning point, as you said, that you've got a list of 52 deliverables. What it doesn't do for me as a reader or somebody who's going to read is what is important and what is more important than others. So I think having less number of deliverables that are actually important, resetting in the context of the finance, I think is a very honest thing to do, because some of them, it takes time to do stuff, and some of them more important. The more urgent.
Yeah, but there's maybe something about we don't necessarily have to articulate every deliverable. If we know what the overall goal is, if everyone then in setting their own targets knows how it contributes to one of the overarching goals, we will be making progress. So there's something about dynamic development of specifics as we go through the year, partly building on the work that we'll be doing for the financial. Well, so, yes. So not to be overly critical, but I think we need to give ourselves a better chance of having a more positive feel as we get to this time next year and we look back at what we've achieved. Okay, anything else on that? No. All right, so thank you for that. Board assurance framework, Linda.
Thank you. This is the last BAF for this current financial year. So I've attempted in the exec summary to give key bullet points of risk movement in here, whether we're within or outside of appetite and tolerance, and just key points for the year. The detail is further in the BAF, and as colleagues know, we have reviews into specific BAF risks within committee during the course of the year. There's a rolling programme. The key point at this stage is to say that obviously we're in the middle of looking at objectives and goals for next year. So the next version of the BAF will be a reiteration, and it's an opportunity to learn from what we've done this year and to work out where we will amend the framework. There will be some amendments to time within the risk policy, and we will be, as we receive the objectives and goals into the organisation and to the board, this will be mapped. So lots of work to step back and think about what worked, what didn't work. Some of the descriptions are very long, some have many controls. Ideally, we like to focus on the controls and the key controls. So there's some work for editing some of the areas that will reappear back in next year. So that's the next stage to do. I'd leave it there and take any questions.
And it is an incredibly comprehensive piece of work, which is brilliant. And I think you're right. It allows us to refine and improve and get some consistency between the different risk areas, how much detail we need to go into it in terms of reporting and management and mitigation. So I mean, some will be more complex and warrant more detail, but yeah, it's a really useful tool and really extraordinarily detailed piece of work. So thank you. We continue to grow. Oh, the one thing I just, as a curiosity, you talked about the where the bank is reviewed. Yes. And the trust exec committee receives the bank. I just wanted to see how frequently is it reviewed?
It's received. It tends to follow a cycle when it's coming from board as well. So but we've actually had a really good discussion, didn't we, Nick, in our strategic tech this week, and looking back, went line by line through the corporate risk register, which feeds into that. So it was a really good conversation because they're very closely linked. We pulled the corporate risk register into the back. Risk register article links and other areas. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Any other comments on that? This one you need approval, is it? Brilliant. Okay. Which is excellent news. Anything anyone wants to raise under any other business in your name?
I just had a couple of points that the Safety Champions meeting asked me to escalate to the board.
Yeah.
One from the board meeting that was held earlier this week. The first one is about the CQC action that came out of the CQC visit, making sure that we keep attention on the actions that we agreed that we would follow up with from the CQC visit.
Is that the maternity visit?
Yes. And the other one, there are two other items. One is about continuity of care, which was mentioned in the CQC visit, but it's also important, particularly for our women who are from ethnic minority backgrounds, because it gives them a better opportunity, a better outcome. And the last thing is about a business case, which hopefully will go through the finance process, because there's a certain sort of key unit, not a sort of maternity person, but we've got very old units which were about come out of service from the supplier, and a number of them have been broken down. We borrowed some from the Royal London, because when we don't have these units in the rooms, we can't monitor babies properly, so the staff end up having to shuffle people around. So it's really important that we actually have hopefully we'll be able to have the capital to implement the system upgrade that we need.
Yeah. And we'll try and do it early in the year.
And we'll try and do it early in the year, yes.
Yeah. Thank you for capturing those, Martin.
Okay, do feedback if there's anything on meeting effectiveness that anyone wants to mention, and opportunity for questions from the public.
Yes, so my apologies for the late question. I know you've written to British Council, Mr. Trainer. Yep. It's easier to ask both questions at the same time. Go for it. Yeah. The first one, have you had any update from British Council about vision of a new surgery at the Tesco development? And secondly, I'm really keen that you get the funding for the new A&E at Queen's. Is there any positive noise about that, Miles?
So on the first one, I had a letter from the chief exec arrive at 2:43 this afternoon.
Oh, great.
So it came in during the session. And what she said is that because there's an open planning application, she's not going to express a view on it from her role, but she's passed the letter on to the Director of the Planning Committee and asked them to make sure that they take into account the impact on healthcare provision for local residents. The letter I've written following your intervention last time, been fed into the Planning Committee from the Chief Exec. I'd be happy to share that exchange of letters with you if helpful. Yes, okay. In terms of the A&E bid, we have put the bid into our capital plan for this year. We haven't yet received confirmation that the money is available, but we are proceeding on the basis that we will be ready to go if and when we get agreement from the national team that the capital will be available. So we're hoping to have some good news on that in the course of the next couple of weeks.
Thanks, Wes. And best of luck with your new job.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Martin's back on the read. The date of our next meeting in public will be 7th of May, and that will be at Queen's. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.